Okay, going live.
Uh,
So did you see my Instagram post from today on
I
Roadway Wiz?
not looked at Instagram today.
Oh yeah, you gotta look at the one that I put up. Either when did I put it up? Today? Yesterday? I have a picture of a speedometer pointed at 120. I'm sure that would be up your alley.
Kilometers per hour, sure.
No, not kilometers per hour this time. No. So that's the thing about the Texas 130 toll road is that they just don't give a shit. So like the speed limit is 85, but you
No
can
one's
just punch it.
enforcing anything
No,
like that.
the cops don't give a shit.
That
So
makes sense. I wouldn't want to go much faster. than
that's
that.
actually the fastest I've ever driven.
Wow.
Was
Beats me by a
3
couple.
weeks ago, driving between San Antonio and Austin.
All right.
I was in a hurry. I had to get back to the north side of Austin.
Fastest
So,
I've ever driven is on I-88.
which one?
This one,
This one?
real one.
Oh. Okay. Do I really have you?
138 for me.
That sounds like you do. I've only driven 117.
Jesus, wow. I never would have guessed that
Jesus didn't even have a car at all.
Well, no, I don't think his horses went that fast either. Tom, I'm sure. See, the thing that's most impressive. See, people are bitching at me because I posted something where I'm going 120 miles an hour, and I'm like, "Yo, you guys should be impressed," because I did it in a Honda Accord.
That is impressive.
Like,
Yeah, mine was in a Camaro, so like it was designed to go that speed.
yeah. So, like, for you, Tom, and your Challenger, your car will be probably like, okay, when are you gonna actually give me a workout?
Yeah, probably when you get over 100, you can start to feel it on like a freeway, but it's not the same as like if you're in like some little front wheel drive dinky car.
Right. See, it's a bigger accomplishment if you make it up to 120 in a Honda, as opposed to as opposed to
They
a
call it-
Challenger. See, it's not impressive if you do it in a Challenger. It's impressive if you do it in a sedan.
Yeah, they call it slow car fast.
Right. Well, hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
We're talking about our need for speed in Texas, which was from a couple weeks ago on my trip to Central Texas, which I know I've talked about a lot, but I haven't actually really shared any content from as of now, but I'm sure that's going to change. It's our season finale event, everybody. Welcome in. Woohoo! Yeah, you're so enthusiastic over here, aren't you?
I'm gonna talk when I'm able to.
Okay. Well, would you like to introduce yourself?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll introduce one of the two panelists here for you.
Who's that guy?
My good friend Steve from Alps Roads
Boo.
from AlpsRoads.net is here.
Boo.
He's here in my living room tonight. Tom Fearer from GribbleNation.org is not in my living room tonight, but he is joining us remotely from California.
Yeah.
Good evening to you, sir.
Good afternoon,
Good. That's
Actually,
right. It is
from my perspective at least.
well, from your
Well, we still have a little
perspective, right?
sunlight here. Tomorrow it'll still be sunny at 6 p.m.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't forget to
yes.
change your clocks, folks. After tonight. I've always kind of associated the changing of the clocks with the real coming of spring.
We're going to
so
keep this presentation going to 1:59 a.m., aren't we?
I think we should. You know, we probably could because there's so much to talk about as far as Portland is concerned. But I'm going to try to condense this and give you the more abridged version tonight because I know Tom probably has other shit he has to do tonight. So I don't want to keep him all night. But great to have you with us for, as you can see on the screen, this is the season finale for season 3. Really happy to have you guys with us tonight. Really happy to talk with you about one of my favorite cities, period. I visited Portland in July of 2021, and I just had a blast. It was a great city to hang out in.
Yeah.
From a civil engineering perspective, this is a great city because of all the freeway construction and all the bridges, and it's been described in the road enthusiast community as the Pittsburgh of the West, and you can see why. You know, when you look at it, you know, from the terrain to the modest size of the city itself to the two rivers, the main rivers in the city, the Columbia and the Willamette, and all the bridges that cross those rivers. This is a very interesting city to discuss, both from a road perspective and a bridge perspective, and we're going to try to unpack as much of that as we can in tonight's episode.
Both of those cities have about 4 button copy signs total.
It might be less than that now.
And Portland has 2 or 3. Pittsburgh has 2 or 3 still.
Well, I'm glad you're keeping track, Steve.
Yep.
Feel spoiled by the button copy here.
Well, California still is one of the button copy capitals anyway. Tom, I know that you just posted a really important and significant blog post on gribblnation.org. Why don't you tell our fans about it?
Well, it's the last one where really we had to cover state highways on Oahu that are actually signed as of right now. And this one was several because it's the entire Farrington Highway, which basically loops the entire western end of Oahu. Several designations and actually has an abandoned segment at Kanea Point, which runs along the grade of what was the Oahu Railway. So it's really one of the larger overall highways on Oahu, but it has, for some reason, what was it, like 5 state highway designations on it.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's important that we kind of break that highway up into its individual segments, too. So I'm glad that we were able to do that.
Yes.
I've been on a very tiny piece of the Farrington Highway before we turned off and followed the main traffic away from it.
This might not be a popular opinion, but the Farrington Highway along the west shore of Oahu was my favorite drive on the whole island.
Oh.
And part of that, I
nice.
think, has to do with the fact that it is so out of the way. Like, tourists don't go out that way in general. Like, they won't, maybe they'll make it out to Kapolei if they're curious, but they won't go north along the west shore very often. So what you see on the west shore of Oahu is still very much a primitive, native kind of setup there. Most of the native Hawaiians still live out that way. So the culture is very different. Of course, the climate is very different, too. You're on the leeward side of the island over there. So there's not... It's kind of like a miniature desert climate over there. Very different from, say, the north shore of the island, where you have the jungles and all that stuff. And it's very different from metropolitan Honolulu, too. So it's a side of the island that not many people get to see when they're visiting. And I definitely recommend, if anybody's going out to Oahu, I know that Sconson's going to be going out there not long from now, but if he's watching this, definitely do yourself a favor and clinch Hawaii Route 93, which is the northern leg of Farrington Highway heading north from the the west end of H1. Because you'll see a side to the island that you won't get anywhere else.
Hawaii is now the only state I've been to once only. But I went there with my family back in 05, or was that 05 or 06, I think. So all my pages are ancient at this point, but I've still got decent highway coverage on the 4 islands we went to. So
I think you need to do something about that, Alps.
I've got old signs on there, the ones that still have the Hawaii state name in them, and both the interstate and state highway shields. 15 years later, you're not going to find those anymore.
Well, I was very fortunate to find 2 of those on the island when I was there.
The fact that there's even 2 left is amazing.
And I think that one of those has been removed since...
Yeah, the 80.
Well, the 80 is gone. The 90 is still there.
One of the ones I found was embossed, which I know is not the case anymore.
Mm-hmm.
No, I went looking for the...
There were still button copy. I've heard that's all Clearview now, so...
Yeah, that's gone.
Yeah, I've got to get back at some point. I'm waiting for the last leper to die in Molokai so they get rid of that county. So I don't have to try to clinch that 4th county out.
All right, I don't want to spend 2 hours talking about dying lepers.
No, but yeah, go to Gribble Nation, decent blog post. You can use my website for some of the older stuff there that I saw. It's all good.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be cool to incorporate that.
Yeah, and then when Tom and I and Steve have been to the other islands, we can expand the Gribble Nation universe to include the other islands too, and then we can do this all over again for the other islands, right, Tom? So
yeah, that's usually seems to be how it goes.
On YouTube, I'm uploading Metropolitan Atlanta stuff right now. That started at the end of February, and it will continue until a time to be determined. I am a little unsure about how to proceed at this point because in addition to the Atlanta stuff from January, there's also Kansas City stuff from last September, and there's also new stuff from Austin and San Antonio, Texas, that'll have to be uploaded at some point.
Ooh.
So this may be a case where I just give you guys a best of Atlanta stuff for now in a series and then move on quickly to something else. We'll have to see how that plays out. Season 3 extension, Tom and I have kind of alluded to this already, but one of the things that we'll be doing as we transition away from a strictly scheduled season format for these live shows, we're going to be kind of just going into a new phase here on the channel where we kind of put our heads together in small groups and say, hey, let's do this weekend. Okay, awesome. So we'll just kind of do it that way for a little while and see how that goes.
Season 3.5?
You know, you can kind of describe it that way because one of the shows that I'm going to do as part of this extension is actually going to be next Saturday. And tune in to this PowerPoint presentation because at the end of it, I will be giving you a little bit of a preview of what next Saturday's show is going to be. One of the other shows I'm working on is an episode that I'm going to do with Tom, and it's going to be kind of a capstone webinar about the island of Oahu that we've been blogging about the last few months on GribbleNation.org. So we're going to kind of have a full entertainment package for you in all sorts of different media. We've already done a podcast episode on the Gribble Nation Roadcast that's available to listen to. We have the blog series on GribbleNation.org that's been being built for the last few months. And then we're going to have a webinar on this channel also to kind of bring everything together. So really looking forward to doing that with Tom. We're probably going to do that late April or so, maybe early May, if we can get our schedules to align. And we'll take it from there. And then there will be other shows too, I'm sure, that I'll want to do. From my travels in the last year or so. I know I've got a huge backlog of ideas, so we'll have to see which ones make the cut in the next few months. This is a little bit of an outdated graphic, but I was too lazy to change it out. But we did have a lockout in Major League Baseball, but we don't anymore. So the Players Association and the owners agreed to a new collective bargaining agreement this past week. So we will have a full 162 game season kicking off on April 7th. I know that you baseball fans out there are happy to see this, and you are taking a picture of my TV screen right now, aren't you? Because you really like this graphic.
Well, I'm going to find out if there's any signings while we're broadcasting today. I will throw them in.
Okay, well, so, Steve's got his eye on the hot stove.
Yep.
Because it's restarted now. Because players can now sign and all that stuff. Trades can be made.
We'll see. A few players signed. The biggest one so far has been Kershaw, but that's only a one-year deal. So we'll see if anything drops in the next 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you have a baseball trip planned for this year, it appears to be on. You know, we're going to have baseball this year. One of the post-meet activities for the Philadelphia meet in August is going to be a baseball game, so it looks like that's going to be on. So very happy that baseball is back and we'll get a full season in and I can watch the New York Yankees disappoint me once again. So one team that has not disappointed me, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention these guys at some point today due to my Delaware roots and connections. The University of Delaware men's basketball team has clinched a berth in the NCAA men's tournament for the second time this century. Congratulations to them. They are champions of the Colonial Athletic Association for the second time since moving to Division I basketball. And they were the 5th seed in their tournament, and they got hot at the right time and won it, so I'm sure they will be rewarded as being a 16 seed in the NCAA tournament. That's probably how it's going to work out.
I'm booing them now, but I'm very sure I'm not going to have to boo them any further than this. So.
You will be rooting for them against whoever they play.
No.
Oh, screw you.
As a New Jersey resident, we all look at Delaware as the place that took people who didn't get into Rutgers, so we all look down on Delaware.
Well, Delaware does have a kick-ass engineering program.
I don't know.
I cannot talk badly about Delaware because both my parents went to school there, And
I can.
Well,
Can
I didn't say you can't. I'm saying that I can't. So congratulations to little old Delaware for getting back to the big dance for the first time since 2014.
So,
Would you like to talk about Portland, Steve?
it's a nice city. My sister doesn't live there anymore, but
I didn't know your sister lived in Portland.
that's the last time I went to Portland.
And how long ago was this?
2019.
Oh, so it was
Pretty
recent.
recent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's when I saw 99 and finished the freeways I hadn't driven the first time.
Hmm. Well, let's see. What can I say about Portland here?
I can say why it's named for the other Portland, but
Well, I can tell you that it's named for that other Portland. It was settled in the 1830s, and it was named in honor of Portland, Maine.
after winning a bet instead of being named Boston.
See, I don't know that story. Do you,
Yeah, that was the story. Is there was a bet for whoever won. One person said it would be named Portland. The other person said it would be named Boston.
Really?
So it actually worked out better that this is named Portland because Portland, Maine never really grew after that, whereas Boston, Mass did. And if this had been named Boston, you would have much bigger... Someone says Boston, you'd be like, well, which one? So outside of the Northeast, everyone says Portland equals Oregon, so it actually helped them by having the name.
Wasn't the bet a coin toss, if I remember right?
Yeah, see, I don't know this story, so you two are on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently it was a coin toss. I thought there was more to it than that, but no.
Really? It came down to that,
It came down to an 1835 large cent. Heads versus tails, that's it. Alright.
All right, well. Yeah, so Portland, as far as the top 50 metro areas in America are concerned, it's right in the middle of the pack. City population is about 650,000. The metro area is slightly more modest compared to other large-scale cities. It's only about 2.5 million. But one of the things you'll notice about Portland Metro is that it's very elongated in the north-south direction, and it's not very wide in the east-west direction. And a lot of that has to do with geography. I'm sure that'll come up at some point during our discussion. The climate in Portland is a very ideal one for growing flowers and other plants such as roses. And so over the years, Portland has become known as the City of Roses as a result. There are beautiful botanical gardens. I didn't visit any of these when I was there, but there's a Japanese garden on the west side of Portland. And downtown, they go out of their way to really spruce up the street corners and stuff like that with all sorts of, flower decorations and flower pots and stuff like that.
And homeless people.
True.
Well,
It's not perfect.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole if I can avoid it tonight, but that unfortunately is a part of the picture also.
Yep.
If you want an honest assessment, then yes, that is a part of it.
Yep. They're the number 25 city in the U.S. I don't know where they fall on the homeless spectrum, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're number 25 in homeless population also.
Well, yeah, I mean it's.
They've got issues.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
That's all.
You could say that about a lot of the cities on the West
Yeah.
Coast right now, frankly.
Yeah, it's the mild climate that kind of draws it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, that's true. You're going to go where the weather is nice. And that's why a lot of them go to California. Because even in January, when the weather quote-unquote sucks in Los Angeles, it's still better than 95% of the rest of the country. So Portland was settled in the years right around when westward expansion was becoming a big deal. The western terminus of the Oregon Trail, the trail that you all have died of dysentery on countless times, that trail had its terminus in the settlement that became known as Oregon City, which is a short distance upstream on the Willamette River. Portland ultimately became the single largest settlement of all of these, and became a real hub of domestic and international trade. Also, it became a major industrial center in the early 20th century, reaching a climax, really, with the Second World War. And then, of course, it's tailed off since then. But interestingly, in the years since then, it's kind of maintained its status due to its stance as an environmentally friendly city. It's one of the real founding cities of the modern-day green movement in America. And because of its more progressive politics, it's been known as a real bastion of, I don't know if counterculture is the right word, but progressive values, I'll say.
You and I were talking. You brought up before how similar Portland was to Pittsburgh in many ways, and certainly the population, the metro area, are pretty similar. The rise of industry, the bridges along the river, very similar. But yeah, that last bullet point really starts to be the way that it differs. That Pittsburgh doesn't really look forward the same way. It's not as green. It's not as
it's
not
as green by a long shot.
Right.
No.
So Portland does have its own unique personality and vibe from that.
Yeah. Pittsburgh also doesn't have these yellow signs like this one here. Don't fall on your ass. I guess that's what the warning sign is.
Pittsburgh took all the rails out of its streets, whereas Portland has the rails running down some streets. So.
Portland is putting rails in their streets.
Yeah, so that's exactly where that comes from.
Yeah. So Portland is very friendly to alternative modes of transportation, such as bus transit. They have a really large-scale light rail system that they're continuing to expand. They also really push hard on bicycle transit and pedestrian traffic.
They removed part of 99W, I believe, from downtown.
Yes, they did.
They took out the whole highway and rerouted it. So, yeah, they pulled out the highway to create a park, to create...
Well, we'll talk more about that in a little while. Yep. Yeah, that was a very landmark event, actually.
They went from roads to green space. So.
Yeah, and they really started a lot of that stuff. Yeah. As far as Oregon as a whole, Oregon was admitted to the Union in 1859. I believe it was the 33rd state. I could be off by one or two, but it was in that pack somewhere. It was right in the midst of, thank you for looking this up, other states such as Nevada and West Virginia entered the Union within a few years of Oregon also. So it's kind of in that cluster. Right in the period of the Civil War. I am correct. Thank you very much. The Oregon State Quarter, you can see on the screen here. Tom, I know you've spent some time around Crater Lake over the years, right?
Yes. I think I've been there 6 times, in fact.
Jesus.
Quite a bit.
Wow. What is the appeal to it? Is there something, is it like...
It's got a crater in the lake.
What? Okay.
It's just...
a crater and a crater in the lake. Oh my goodness.
Like, what keeps you coming back?
Well, for one, it's just this is a national park near me, so it's something to do. The whole Rogue River watershed and everything around it, too, is an attraction unto itself. But, yeah, you get that 1,900-foot deep lake. You got some decent hiking trails around there. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so it's not frequently visited, kind of like to the degree like a Yosemite would be.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I never knew where this was until very recently. But yeah, it does make sense that it would kind of be a little bit off the beaten path, so to speak. But
yeah, kind of like Lassen is, except this is more popular than Lassen. All those kind of Cascade national parks, they don't tend to get a lot of attention for some reason.
Yeah. Well, my notes didn't save before I went live, so I'm going to try to do this from memory, and I'm going to try to give you a crash course in Portland professional sports as quickly as possible. We should start with the 2 teams that are the most recognizable on this screen. The Portland Trailblazers in the NBA have been around since 1970. They are the 1970 NBA champions. They have been home to multiple notable Hall of Fame players and coaches, including Bill Walton, Lenny Wilkens, and, of course, Dr. Jack Ramsey. The Portland Timbers, you can see on the far right here, they are the MLS affiliate for the Portland area. Founded in 2011. They won the MLS Cup in 2015. One of the more interesting soccer rivalries in all of North America is the rivalry that has developed between Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, British Columbia. Those three teams participate in something known as the Cascadia Cup, which is one of the more fierce rivalries in all of Major League Soccer, if not the most. And it's always entertaining when two of those three teams get together because the fan bases of those three cities have really taken to their MLS teams. And it creates a really exciting atmosphere even to watch on TV. So there's that. Doug is not here tonight. Boo. So I cannot talk to you. I cannot have him tell you about the Portland Winterhawks. So I will try to do so from memory real quick. They have been a WHL franchise, the Western Hockey League in Portland since the mid 1970s. They began life in I think they started in Edmonton as the Oil Kings in 1950. They've been in Portland for the last 50 years or so. As you can see by this logo right here, they had a very similar logo originally to the NHL Chicago Blackhawks, but they were rebranded in 2021, and now they have this angry-looking Winterhawk as their logo.
With the mountain in it.
That's right.
Sort of like the Portland Rockies, even though Portland's nowhere near the Rockies.
Yeah, would you like to talk about baseball now?
No.
Well, I'm going to talk about it anyway.
I still don't have any updates for who signed with who, so...
Well, you keep your eye on the hot stove, and I'll keep my eye on this then.
Right.
We'll divide it up that way.
I think it's interesting that you've got the Portland Rockies on the left, and it's the same mountain, practically, that's in the Hawk on the right.
Kind of.
Very similar.
It looks like one of those Bob Ross happy little mountains, doesn't it?
It's an angry hawk, but yeah. Happy mountain.
I wonder if Bob Ross ever called anything angry. He probably didn't. That's just not his type.
No, but probably his ex-spouse or something. I don't know.
Anyway, the Portland Beavers, as we switch gears to baseball, are the single longest tenured baseball team in Portland. Although they've had a very rocky, tumultuous history with the city, there are at least 3 different iterations of the Beavers over the course of the last 100 years. The first one was founded in 1903. They were a charter member of the original PCL, the Pacific Coast League. They have been relocated at least 3 different times. The first time resulted in a bit of a vacuum that was filled by another minor league team called the Portland Mavericks. The Beavers returned for a period of time and then left again in the early 90s. That gap was filled by the expansion Colorado Rockies A-ball team, the Portland Rockies. And then the Beavers came back again, and because I don't have my notes saved, I can't give you all the details on this, but they left again.
Is this why you've got the Chihuahuas and the Bears on there? Because that's where they all went.
I'm glad you brought up the angry-looking dog logo, because the Beavers most recently were the AAA affiliate for the San Diego Padres. However, they fell on hard times as well. They were relocated at the end of the 2013 season because the city of Portland could not agree to a financing plan for a new Beavers stadium downtown. So the team relocated to El Paso, Texas, where they are known today as the Chihuahuas.
So the Yakima Bears and the Hillsboro Hops are both other past Beavers teams?
Now, the last chapter of this story comes after 2013, when, once again, the gap created by the Beavers relocating was filled by another short season, or actually I think the Hillsboro Hops are now a long season A team. They're kind of at the same level as the Hudson Valley Renegades are.
Okay.
The Hillsboro team came in, they play their games in the west suburbs, hence their name Hillsboro, but they came by way of Yakima, which was a short season team that began play in 1990. They were originally known as the Yakima Bears. So today you have the Hillsboro Hops, you have the Portland Trailblazers, the, what the fuck is their name? Portland Timbers, thank you, and the Portland Winterhawks. Those are the teams that call Portland home today. Notice there's no NFL team.
Yep.
There's never really been a push to have an NFL franchise in Oregon.
No.
Nor do I think that one would ever gain much traction here.
No.
Is there an echo in here, or
No.
would you like to sit closer to the microphone
No.
so you can
No.
make your opinion heard
No, I'm
more?
just agreeing with you.
Okay.
I got nothing.
Well, if you change your mind, you
If
can.
I ever disagree with you, you'll know. Don't worry about
Oh, I know that. Yeah. Off and on, you've heard things here or there about maybe Major League Baseball being interested in the Portland market. They seem to have soured on that, though, in recent years. MLB is currently structured at 30 teams. They would like to get to 32. The two that you're hearing most right now as far as expansion are Montreal and Nashville. That seems to be where this is heading right now. Yeah, National League in Montreal, American League in Nashville.
It depends on the Canadian dollar for Montreal getting anything back. But anyway, since it's not roads, we don't have to spend forever talking.
We'll save that for the Montreal webinar.
Yeah. All right.
Just some pictures here of downtown Portland. You can see in this picture on the right, this is the Moda Center. This is where the Trailblazers play, and I think the Winterhawks play here as well. This is a really picturesque city, and in a lot of ways. You know, I was here in early July. It's a beautiful city. You know, the backdrop of the mountains in the background. See.
Are you on the 84 ramp onto 5 there?
The picture on the right, yes, on this slide, yeah.
I recognize that.
I imagine you would. Were you watching last week's live show?
No, I was not able to watch last week.
I was gonna say we did show this ramp.
I was barely conscious last week, but the last time I was in Portland, I drove this ramp, so I recognize it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this is a pretty nice entrance into Portland, yeah. Tom is just sitting there in the background enjoying the free entertainment.
I'm taking it all in.
Yeah,
I was kind of wondering about the Chihuahuas thing.
This is the season finale. You got to enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Here is that riverfront park that Steve has alluded to. We'll talk more about that in a little while. Again, a very, very nice looking downtown area. Very pretty city overall. All right. You want to talk about roads?
Yeah, let's talk about roads.
So, really the plan, the map of Portland began to take shape in earnest in 1943. The city of Portland commissioned New York City-based planner Robert Moses, whose name you've probably heard before. Robert Moses, by the way, in the early 40s was seen as a bit of a deity as far as urban planning was concerned. Cities around America were very enthralled with how Robert Moses was transforming New York City into a modern, 20th century powerhouse. And cities around America were eager to follow his lead. And many cities around America commissioned him to look into their cities and how they could, further develop them in the years after World War II to improve access and urban development and urban relocation of slums and stuff like that. The operative term there, of course, being slum clearance. So in 1943, the city of Portland commissioned him to do a study on different highways that could be constructed, different slum clearance projects that could be implemented. And really everything that you see on the map today in Portland has its roots in that 1943 study. What you'll see that may jump out at you right away on this map on the left is the inner loop of highways here that encircles the west side of downtown and crosses over the Willamette River twice, which is basically more or less the exact same thing that you see today. And then there you can see kind of on this map how there are different highways that radiate out from this inner loop. And that's basically the gist of what Portland was looking for from the beginning. This is the Robert Moses plan from 1943 that you're looking at right now. And when you fast forward 70 years to the present time, it didn't really change all that much. What Portland has today is very much what it planned back in the 1940s, and that's very important for you to keep in mind as we go through this presentation. Various different schemes were drawn up for different highways. There were new bridges over the Willamette River that were planned, that were planned specifically for the freeway and the future interstate highway system. You can see these two renderings that I have on the screen here. The model on the left, the scale model that you see here, is very impressive to me personally as an engineer. This is probably a rendering from the late 1950s, and it shows a couple of things that are really interesting. And I'm going to bring in the highlighter here, so excuse my reach here as I point out a couple of things to you that I think you should take note of. One of them is, that's not quite thick enough. Let's go with that. If I draw a line here, that is a terrible line, but it's going to have to be good enough for this show. Where I've highlighted in yellow, that is the original Harbor Drive Freeway that was part of US 99W, and as I'm sure we'll talk about later tonight, it's no longer with us. Removed in the 1970s. Also, if I draw in blue, there's a freeway running along the east side of the river across downtown. And that is ultimately what became Interstate 5. And also, of course, we have a freeway that begins at the east end of the Markham Bridge and runs off in the easterly direction. And you are laughing rather sinisterly because, of course, you know what this highway is. It's one of Portland's most infamous unbuilt freeways. I love the double-deck component to that freeway, by the way, as it takes off in the easterly direction. That would have been a very badass highway to enjoy. But unfortunately, we don't have that today. But we can talk about it, though, and we'll do that as this evening's show progresses. So the Robert Moses Plan of the 1940s was eventually implemented. Not necessarily exactly, but Portland officials took it to heart, and they did everything they could to see to it that the Moses Plan was implemented as well as possible. You have this map here from the I think this is the map on the left is just a blown up version of the map on the right. But I believe these were taken from the late I want to say this is around 1967.
Yeah, because you don't have Vista Canyon, the freeway, done yet on US 26. So it would have been late 60s.
Right, so that's the dotted line still. The Fremont Bridge is the dotted line.
Yeah, 30. The part that they did build of 30 is still dotted. And the what they ultimately intended to reroute 80N is dotted beyond the end of 405, and that they never got very far with that either.
Yeah, and of course Harbor Drive is on this map. As you can see, it's running along the west bank of the Willamette River through downtown. If we go to this slide, okay, this is showing you the completed inner loop system. I-5 crosses the Willamette River at the bottom of the screen and then heads north along the east bank of the river. I-405 follows the western half of the loop, heads through downtown, crosses the river at the north end of its journey, and you put those two highways together and you have effectively an inner loop. And then you have other highways branching off of that too, like US 26 heads westward, I-84 and US 30 head eastward from there. That is the system that survives today. Again, it is an artifact of the original 1943 Robert Moses Plan. It's very important that you make that connection between the two. Not that there's going to be a quiz at the end of this show or anything, but I would just like to emphasize that. Regionally, this is the system that survives today. In addition to the stuff downtown, there was a considerable amount of construction outside of the city limit. 84, of course, begins its journey eastward in Portland and heads out through Corco Potato Land and Utah. If you have not watched our virtual tour episode on Interstate 84, that is a very good supplemental resource for you. I can strongly recommend that you tune into that. I know some of you who are watching live right now may have watched that live last week, but if you haven't already seen that show, I definitely recommend that you check that one out as well. So 84 is there as the east-west thoroughfare leading away from downtown Portland. You also have US 26 leading away towards the Oregon coast. The I-205 bypass is there as well. Washington State, the suburbs out that way, also were not shy about building freeways as well. You can see a couple of those on the screen here with 14 and 500. We'll talk a little bit more about those as well as the evening progresses. But that's kind of the system as it stands today. Not exactly a robust system. They were limited to some extent by geology and whatnot. And also, Portland was one of the hub cities of the modern-day freeway revolt uprising that was more of a national thing. So,
yeah, that what we saw before with the dash line at the end of 405, if you look at where 84 is heading west here, it would have tied very nicely into the north end of 405 by just heading straight. And that's one we can talk about. There's a couple we're going to talk about, I know.
There's a couple that we're going to focus on in particular.
And meanwhile, Jordan Lyles has just signed with the Orioles, so...
I have no idea who that is.
Not small potato pitcher, but that's the first signing of our broadcast.
Oh, he signed with who? He signed with the Orioles?
Yep.
So yeah, do you hear that, Laura? You have a new pitcher that's going to give up 3-run homers to the Yankees all season.
I'm okay with that.
I'm very okay with that.
All
right. Let's start our run through of Portland freeways here. First, let me take a sip of California wine.
No, why don't you have Oregon wine? Can't talk about Oregon spine without Oregon wine.
If I had Marionberry, I would have that. But Doug is not here to supply me with any.
True.
And I'm very angry that Doug cannot be watching this, or maybe he is watching, I don't know. But he can't be partaking in the live component of this show. Anyway, the 5 freeway, the main north-south highway, the main south thoroughfare through Portland Metro from Oregon City on up into Vancouver, Washington, and beyond. Really, it's the main north-south interstate for the whole state of Oregon. Most of the Oregon's population is located west of the Cascades. So 5 serves the cities of Portland on down through Eugene, Salem, Corvallis.
Pretty much all of them, yeah.
Medford, yeah. I mean, it serves all the major population centers in the state. In some ways, you could look at I-5 as an economic main street for the state of Oregon. One thing I would like to mention before I turn it over to Steve and Tom for additional comment is about 47% of the entire state population in Oregon resides within the Portland metro area. So we may think of Portland as being a very centralized location for all affairs in the state of Oregon, not just the ones related to Portland, but also the entire state.
Like how New York City anchors New York State with that percentage of population.
I think it's about the same population now. Yeah, I mean it's not quite to the extreme as say Las Vegas is to Nevada, but it's very noticeable and very significant. Yeah.
You get that whole state of Jefferson thing down the south end of the state. It's like a completely different world compared to Portland.
Right. If you go east and south, especially.
Definitely the east side is different. I was going to say another way that Oregon and New York are similar is as you follow I-5, you get to those other cities, whether you're going to an Oregon City down through Salem, Medford, etc. Those cities are not inconsiderable in terms of population. Yeah, they may only be 30, 50,000. If you're looking at Salem, it may be more like 100 or 150,000. But when I was driving Old 99, and mostly parallel but not on I-5, every 20 to 30 minutes I was in a decent-sized town to a larger city every hour or two. So even if the population is centered around Portland, the rest of this corridor is at least decently well populated. Just like the rest of New York State has cities every couple of hours apart. You're never that far from anything, whereas certain states like Arizona, like Nevada, you can get hours away from anyone. And so, at least Western Oregon, you're never that far from a major population area.
Yeah, most of them, I-5 doesn't really follow like the existing freight corridors, but it definitely does in Oregon. You have a lot of rail sidings that were set up like back in the 19th century, and I-5 kind of tends to stick to them. It usually diverges in California and even some parts of Washington, I believe.
But even where 99W or 99 in general, like Junction City, for example, Corvallis, you're still not that far from I-5. There's really only one region in Oregon that's you can see is mostly settled, and it's within about 30 miles east or west, or even 20 miles of I-5. So it's overall it's very clustered around that highway, even if it gets more numerous as you get north.
The one current event I'd like to bring up is related to a proposed widening project on 5. I forget what the exact name of it is. They basically want to add a lane to 5 from 84 up to the northern junction of 405. And really what they'd be doing here is eliminating a bottleneck section where you have the traffic coming in from the 5 and the 84, and then the freeway narrows down to 2 lanes per direction there. Oregon DOT officials are committed to eliminating this bottleneck. The thing is that this single project right off of the Oregon Convention Center and just off of the Moda Center in that northeastern quadrant of downtown, it's projected to cost over $1 billion just to improve a single mile of urban freeway there. And this has been a flashpoint of contention with freeway removal advocates and also urban planners of all different backgrounds. What do you do in a situation like this? And, it's not going to be one of those projects that's easy as far as the construction and the implementation of it. But while I don't think that constructing new facilities is appropriate, I do think that eliminating operational deficiencies with existing highways is something that's worth looking into. So the east bank of the Willamette River, with regards to I-5, has always been a trouble spot with urban planners, going back to the 50s when they proposed the East Bank Freeway originally.
West side is downtown, west side is the city, east side is, while it belongs to Portland, it is fundamentally a different location in terms of how it feels, in terms of who lives there, the economic side of things. Everything's much different on the east side of the river.
Yeah, it's
outside of a very small area immediately adjacent to the river. As soon as you get any further than that, it's completely different.
Yeah, once you get off the Riverwalk, basically.
Yeah,
it changes drastically. Yeah.
My sister lived on the east side, but 4 blocks from the river, so still within that realm.
The east side really retains a lot of its industrial railroad heritage to this day. And I think this is one of those themes that we've come across this season with cities, whether it's Baltimore or Seattle or now Portland. When you're building urban freeways, back in the 50s when they were first proposed, you're going to want to build them on riverfront property because that's your old industrial property that didn't have a whole lot of value anymore in the years after World War II. So you just stick them there because it's the path of least resistance. Nowadays, we value riverfront property much more than we used to. So, freeways like Harbor Drive, which we'll talk about more later tonight, or the East Bank Freeway section of I-5, those freeways have now become under much greater scrutiny because they occupy what is now considered to be very valuable riverfront real estate. And the question is, what do you do about that? And obviously every city is tackling the issue in their own unique way, and I'm sure that Portland will, continue to address it in their own unique way in the decades ahead. We saw what it's done in cities like Seattle and Baltimore already. I don't expect Portland to be any different. I'm sure they'll have an interesting next chapter to write as far as that's concerned. And here are a couple more pictures of the 5 freeway on the Washington State side of the ledger.
Nice older sign on the...
Yeah, I do like the older setup of the sign, the North I-5 sign on the left there.
The whole thing in general is a bit old school the way...
Mm-hmm.
Washington always does things a bit differently,
Yeah. I do like the gantries, the sign gantries in Washington and Oregon. Reminds me a lot of when I was really young and I was getting my first introduction to Connecticut. Because I loved those really streamlined, like very simple looking overhead sign gantries that Connecticut used to have. They're doing away with them now, but you still have some of that in Washington and Oregon, and I really appreciate seeing that. It's kind of like coming home in a way. Not to get incredibly sentimental at this hour, but
go for it.
You,
this is the season finale. You're supposed to get a little sentimental.
I should go off on an hour-long soliloquy
Absolutely.
right now about sign gantries. I know you would love to hear that.
You get the big uni signs up in Washington State too, individual shields.
That the 1C 1D being on the same sign, par for the course in that last slide. This one now we're on the most boring of all the freeways though.
Well, it's on paper it might be.
To me, 205 is the most boring freeway in the Portland area.
It might be when you drive it. It actually has one of the more interesting backstories. The 205 freeway was proposed as far back as the Robert Moses plan of the 1940s. Portland really took the Moses plan and added it onto it. They realized very early on that, hey, we're going to build all these freeways downtown. We better have a bypass. So the Portland bypass was conceived in the early 1950s. It was expedited to the interstate system in 1958 upon approval from AASHTO. Washington State followed suit. Of course, it's important to recognize at this point that 205 is a bi-state designation. It does include the Columbia River Bridge across from Portland International Airport. By the way, that is why I have a note here for PDX. Portland International Airport forms, or it runs right across from the freeway, actually. The 205 freeway forms its eastern boundary, more or less, right as it crosses the Columbia River. In fact, if you're approaching PDX Airport from the east, you will fly at very low altitude right over the 205 freeway as it crosses the Columbia River, which was quite a joy for me when I got to experience that in early July.
I did it with my family back in 2004.
Well, aren't you special?
So it's been a while. I have not noticed.
So there's the PDX connection. On a macro scale, the 205 serves as a connection between all of the eastern suburban communities of consequence, from Oregon City up through Maywood Park and up into Washington, east of Vancouver. This freeway went through a lot of different iterations, from the late 50s through the late 60s, about roughly a 10-year period. The most notable communities to object to the initial routings of the proposed 205 were Oregon City in the southeastern corner of the highway, Maywood Park, which if you look at that on a map is right more or less where the 205 and 84 come together, and then also the city of Portland itself, which is where parts of the freeway were routed in the 60s and 70s. The most significant move, and there's a lot of stuff that you could talk about and read about as far as the 205 is concerned. The neighborhood of Maywood Park on the east side of Portland took it to a whole nother level in 1967 when their residents voted to incorporate as a city as an attempt to prevent I-205 from passing through their neighborhood. The effort was ultimately unsuccessful. Ultimately, 82 homes were lost within the limits of Maywood Park due to the construction of the freeway. However, due to their status as an incorporated city, Maywood Park did gain a larger seat at the bargaining table with Oregon DOT officials in the 1960s. And they were able to gain more concessions from ODOT as far as the eventual routing and the eventual design of the 205 freeway through their area. And these things include things like noise reduction systems, the redesign of the 205 freeway to a below-grade highway in numerous areas, which further cut down on noise pollution, and other concessions from ODOT as well, such as the creation of new greenbelt trails, the preservation of the Rocky Butte hillside area immediately adjacent to the freeway, and the creation of green space in Maywood Park known as the Gateway Green, which is actually
not really. That's sort of south of Maywood Park, at least according to the outlines I'm seeing. Maywood Park is north of Gateway Green entirely, but they threw it in there.
Yeah, but Maywood Park gained quite a significant seat at the bargaining table, and the city of Portland as well during this period of time, and they were able to force a lot of concessions on ODOT as far as the design of that stretch of freeway there. So, is it boring to drive? Yeah, kinda, but it actually has a lot of interesting backstory that I encourage you guys to look into on your own time.
There's a good vista point, too, in Rocky Butte Park, you mentioned it.
Yeah, I didn't actually stop there, but I know that hillside there overlooks the whole 205-84 exchange there.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, that I would say that's worth checking out also. Maybe next time I'm in Portland. And again, because this is a bi-state highway, here are a couple of signs, a couple of shots from the Washington side of the ledger.
The red's always faded out on the Washington side. Always.
I find it interesting that the exit numbers don't reset.
No, so that's one of those interesting things about this highway, right? So it's a bi-state highway, but the exit numbers do not reset at the state line. And I presume that that's because the relative short distance that's spent in each state.
I mean, 25 miles in Oregon and at least 10 it's substantial.
Yeah, I've always understood that ODOT and Washington just had an agreement that we don't want to even invite the possibility of confusion, so we just won't renumber.
That's
but
I mean, most bi-state loops do not have that problem. It's
they
odd
also
that they've done that here.
Well, yeah, but also it's true that most bi-state highways spend much more time in individual states than the 205 does.
205 is long enough. It should just reset. But anyway.
Would you like to talk about the Banfield Freeway?
There's so much to talk about with Banfield, but again, it's the fact that Banfield exists at all, but the other freeways parallel to it on the east side were never built. And that's the bigger story, that everyone coming in from the east is getting forced onto the Banfield to get to downtown Portland. And there really should be at least one, if not two, parallel freeways that were originally planned and not built here that would help distribute that traffic. So as a result, you can see in these pictures how crowded it is, and that's in no small part because this is the only freeway that ended up being done. And it's windy. It really does not belong as the mainline 84 freeway. And that's your second bullet point right there.
Got those DMS 30-mile-per-hour signs there too. It suddenly just ends at I-5.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And this was a very old corridor. It was built mainly parallel to existing railroad right-of-ways, so it minimized the amount of community disruption and whatnot. But because they shoved it in the place that they did, they really limited themselves as far as what they could do as far as expansion of the road. There's no real way to widen it. In recent years, the light rail system in Portland has come to that original railroad corridor. The light rail has gradually seen increased ridership over the years. It seems to be mainly catching some traction on the downtown to the airport corridor, so that's a positive development. ODOT also experimented with HOV lanes along the 84 on the Banfield section. Those turned out to be an absolute disaster because there was no way to enforce it, and Portland drivers were just not willing to follow the signs. So that experiment didn't last for very long. Given the fact that this is the only east-west highway that serves downtown Portland and serves the east suburbs, yeah, you can kind of understand how this freeway is very overutilized for its original design capacity. But again, There were as many as 3 major freeways that were intended to serve this area, and this is the only one that survives today.
Yep. It feels like the Mass Pike, but Mass Pike is 4 lanes and this is only 3.
Yeah, the design of this highway, because it was built so relatively early, it has that pre-interstate feel to it.
The walls, you got the rail, yeah.
Yeah, it's very substandard by most measures. And this was also not meant to be an interstate full time. They applied the I-80N designation to this on a temporary basis, with the understanding that they could shift it south to the Mount Hood Freeway, because they were under the impression that that highway would be built to supplement the Banfield, which would have been signed exclusively as U.S. Route 30. But we'll talk about in a little while how things didn't quite go to plan.
Mets just traded for pitcher Chris Bassett. Again, not a major pitcher. But
I don't know who the hell that is either.
All right, some other deal. That's all. That seems to be the major news. Baseball, keeping you updated.
Okay. Steve is gonna be the first to break the news of Freddie Freeman signing somewhere.
If it happens, yep.
You'll hear it here first,
Yep.
people. I know Mark Moore is lurking somewhere in the live chat. If it's anywhere other than the Braves, he's gonna be very upset.
If it's the Yankees, I'm happy.
Woohoo!
We'll see. There's 3 choices, and those are 2 of the 3. So anyway, we could talk back to road. 405 goes from the least interesting on 205 to the most interesting. So
Yes.
yeah,
You're on a roll, Steve. Keep going.
No, let's talk 405. 405 ultimately got built, which itself is a minor miracle. So
It kind of is. You know, when you think about what they had to go through to actually build it.
took a long time.
Yeah. And that's just the section in the south of downtown. So 405 forms the western half of the downtown loop I was showing you before on the maps. And I think that the best way to summarize this whole thing is that Oregon and the city of Portland paid a very steep price for what turned out to be one of the great American urban drives. I think that's agreeable.
The views are spectacular on it. Out of the 3 405s, it's by far the best one.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because the 405 in Oregon is the shortest one of the 3.
The 405 in California has some great views also if you can drive it when it's not soaked with traffic.
Which I have done.
The northern part has nice scenery, but I've driven this one southbound only. You drove it northbound, so your photos look different. But
yeah,
I could say the southbound when you come across that bridge, hopefully we'll get some good photos from the bridge, or videos. But
right.
Yeah, you're flying over the whole city of Portland at that point.
That is a great view. Yeah, 405. Of course, is a part of that 1943 Robert Moses plan that was commissioned. And it really took a lot of time, and it was a painstaking process. There were multiple different alignments that were considered. I can go to this slide to show you. There was a southern alignment and a northern alignment. You can see the one that obviously ultimately got built is outlined in red. The University District vehemently opposed the southern alignment because it basically would obliterate their whole neighborhood. They instead proposed a partial recycling of the already existing Harbor Drive alignment that would then cut west across the southern end of downtown to meet the Sunset Freeway at more or less a T-junction before sending the 405 further north towards the Willamette River. Yes, sir.
It's fascinating that you bring this up because when I went to university, I learned in Boston that one of the proposals favored by both Harvard and MIT would have been to complete I-695 through the middle of Cambridge, destroying all of the homes and downtown Central Square, basically dividing the city in half, and then MIT and Harvard would each just build to the sides of it and take over the entire city of Cambridge.
You're talking about Boston, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yes,
okay.
but just looking at the university district, of like my experience, what I know of universities and building 3-digit interstates was they loved the idea of taking out as much as possible of the city. And I can see here, the university wanted to take out a bunch of downtown to build the freeway. So, they could have built more and owned more of the rest of it instead of being sandwiched against downtown where they really couldn't expand. So I could see why they wanted this here.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's a perspective I hadn't thought of. But yeah, like, we think of the Inner Belt proposal in Boston, and we don't really necessarily think about the positive outcome that it would have had for Harvard and MIT.
Yeah, the university always wants the freeway to go on the side where it gives them the most opportunity to grow. And that's certainly true here in Portland, the same.
Portland State University, yeah.
They would have grown to the south a lot easier.
Yeah. And so this became a battle between these two main alignments. I'm, of course, omitting a lot of the details that you can look up on your own time. But in the end, the red alignment won out. And the freeway was aligned in the direction that it was. One of the logistical problems with building this highway in the location it was is because of, you notice all the cross streets here, right? And they had to keep certain streets open and while closing off other ones. So this was actually a very long-term, tedious construction project. Because they had to keep some streets open while building the overpasses for the other streets, and then once those were in place, they could shut down the other streets, and it just became this huge nightmare for several years on the south side of downtown Portland. And actually, if you go to this slide, you look at the picture in the upper left, you can kind of see what I'm talking about, how many different overpasses had to be implemented into the 405 construction. The freeway was mainly built as it was originally intended in the early to mid-1960s, but it has left a visible scar on the south and west corners of downtown Portland that remains today. There has been talk off and on about possibly introducing some sort of a cap or a cover to parts of this highway to introduce more green space into the mix, which I think would be a good idea. It also might improve land values in the area and might also help the university district in that respect. But it remains to be seen what permanent measures the city of Portland takes. Of course, a lot of this stuff was put on hold because of the COVID pandemic, but we'll have to see what happens in the immediate years ahead. I would like to also point out the picture in the lower right on this slide is the lower deck of the Fremont Bridge, which we'll spend a bit more time talking about later on in this presentation. But that is a double-deck bridge. You can see how the ramps split into I-5 north and south. And there's also this weird ramp for Kirby Avenue. Gee, I wonder what that was intended for.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that. Steve is laughing maniacally again.
Quietly.
Tom, you have notes on US 26, the Sunset Highway, I believe?
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead?
Sunset Highway. That's a pretty cool one, I think. It goes through Vista Canyon. So basically the origins of Vista Canyon was a plank road that was built in the 1850s, which in the U.S. route era got upgraded to what was known as Canyon Road. What's cool about the Sunset Highway is it emerges into downtown through the Vista Canyon tunnels, which were completed in 1969 and 1970. And if you're heading east on US 26, you just get this sudden emergence of downtown Portland, which is this really got a spectacular view. It kind of reminds me almost like the Cabrillo Freeway in San Diego, except you go through a tunnel. Or Vista Ridge, I should say, not Vista Canyon.
Yeah, I would say the Vista Ridge Tunnel is probably the single most recognizable part of this whole stretch of highway. It's certainly the one that most road geeks bring up.
Yes.
And usually when they bring it up, they're not bringing it up in a flattering manner. Because it is, well, I mean, it is very nice, but it is also a bottleneck for traffic, especially eastbound traffic as you descend that grade. And then you turn sharply to the right if you're heading east, and you enter the tubes at that point. That is a choke point for traffic, no doubt. But for what it is, it's a very interesting drive. I would like to bring up a couple other things. It is one of the main highways to connect Portland with the Oregon coast. There are other highways too. There's US 30 to the north. There's US 20 is a bit further south,
And
but
30, I imagine we'll be talking about in a bit.
yeah. There's a couple of state highways too that I think make the crossing between the I-5 corridor, the US 99 corridor, and the coast. But 26 is probably the major one that gets you from Portland to the coast itself.
The interesting thing about 26 is that it takes you away from downtown very quickly. Your first exit's for the zoo, and by the time you get to an exit for a road, you're a couple miles away from downtown in the middle of nowhere. So they never had it. Once you take 26, you're leaving the city.
Yeah, right.
Sunset Highway as a whole is relatively new construction. It was built over a 16-year period between 1933 and 1949. Originally known as the Wolf Creek Highway, when US 26 was extended, it didn't just end at US 101. It went all the way to Astoria before the bridge was built.
Okay. I assume you're talking about that bridge to Washington, right?
That bridge, yes.
That bridge. Okay. Is it right, Tom, that the 26, or what became US 26, but the Sunset Highway between Portland and the Oregon coast was really a byproduct of the Great Depression and the Works Progress Administration?
I believe it was a WPA project, yes.
Yeah, and it was one of the more significant ones in the state of Oregon. I think they were responsible for other stuff as well. They may have been in on the original Oregon Coast Highway. There's that. There's also the Bonneville Dam that they were invested in. So they invested a lot in the West Coast. But I think the Sunset Highway was one of those projects that they really were quite fond of in the 30s.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine just that not being there, because it's hard getting to the coast from Portland anywhere else unless you want to follow US 30 and the Columbia River Highway.
Yeah, and I had the chance to drive US 26 when I was on my way out to Astoria back in July, and yeah, it's hard enough getting out to the coast just following 26. And then you can't imagine what it would be like if you didn't have 26 there. So, really, 26 is an interesting drive by itself. If you've got time for a virtual tour episode, maybe we'll do that highway someday. But, 26 is an interesting drive from Portland out to Astoria and out that way. Well, I see the black and white Interstate shield has joined us. So nice of it to make an appearance. You know what that means. We're going to make reference to an unbuilt interstate highway here. Officially, so if you look at a map, right, you have the Fremont Bridge, and at each end of it, really, you have these highways that kind of dead end and don't really go anywhere. Well, on the south side of the Fremont Bridge, you have just that. On the northwest side of downtown, this highway is signed as US 30. It was originally intended as part of the interstate system. It would have been recommissioned as I-505. This was intended as a freeway spur heading off generally in the northwest direction. It would have improved access to the St. Helens neighborhood. It also probably would have done a lot in terms of clearing out low-income housing areas along the industrial areas near the riverfront. And that's probably a big reason why it was proposed in the first place. Reading between the lines, if you will. But the industrial freeway itself never really became a reality, and what we're left with is this short stub freeway that leads into the south end of the Fremont Bridge, which is signed as part of US Route 30.
And I think this would have gone at least to St. John's Bridge, possibly a bit further than that.
That's what I've seen on maps. That's the extent of it.
Right.
It's hard to say if they would have actually extended the freeway more along U.S. Route 30 itself, but the original application to AASHTO for the interstate highway system included just the section as far northwest as the St. John's Bridge.
Makes sense. I'd love if that bridge made it into this webinar today, but we'll see.
Do you? Really?
We'll see.
Well, you know, I won't give too much away, but it is true that, you know, dreams come true every once in a while. So I won't crush your hopes just yet.
A dream is a wish my heart makes.
I've heard that before, once or twice. Yeah. Real quick, I'll talk about 217 because it's not really that interesting a highway. But I suppose the thing that I should mention here is that this is the north-south freeway across the southwestern suburbs of Portland. One of the real problems with this highway is the fact that there are way too many interchanges. I think there's an interchange on average every 2/3 of a mile along this highway, which is way too many. And that creates operational issues, too, when you deal with merging traffic and exiting traffic and how those two interact with each other and how they interact with the general use lanes. Oregon DOT is, well, they're at a loss for what to do because there isn't a whole lot of room to expand this highway. And so they're kind of stuck with what they've got, as you can see on the next slide.
A lot of those suburbs west towards Hillsborough have grown substantially over the years, and yeah, you could almost see more of an outer loop, like continue 205 west in sort of an outer bypass.
Right, yeah, so there's been talk about a western bypass of Portland going back to the 1960s. And one of the hypothetical paths that it would take would be a northern continuation of the 217. I suspect that any Portland Western bypass would be met with a lot of opposition, mainly because of, well, I mean, just dealing with the terrain of the mountains out that way. That would be a huge challenge to overcome. So that's all I got to say about 217. Tom, do you want to talk about, as we transition to honorable mentions here, do you want to talk about your favorite U.S. highway?
What, US 99?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, also my favorite bridge in Portland, the Steel Bridge.
Hey,
but yeah, you had US 99 split off into east-west branches in Portland. The west side's obviously in downtown. We've been talking about that with Harbor Drive, and US 99 East is on the east side of the Willamette River. It's kind of a vestige of the U.S. route system, given that the state routes have the same numbers. And really, they're kind of handy, both of them. Even though Harbor Drive is just a surface route, it is a pretty viable alternate to Interstate 5 or 405 if traffic's backed up. But it takes some familiarity with the area. I didn't really get a lot of good... We didn't get a good feel for 99E compared to 99W, but you could see where the utility would have been with both of those.
I think we didn't really talk about this, Tom, with the Seattle presentation, but maybe you could give us a brief summary of the original US 99 and when it got downgraded to state highway status. Is there a timeline that you can give us for that?
There is. So US 99, as originally envisioned, ended in El Centro, California, was quickly extended to the Mexican border. So it was Canadian to Mexican border highway. In 1963, it was truncated from Calexico to downtown Los Angeles at the Golden State Freeway and San Bernardino Freeway interchange. June 1965, got decommissioned out of California completely into Oregon, Ashland specifically. I don't remember the specifics on the dates when Washington was the first to decommission it after California, which left as a standalone U.S. route just solely in Oregon, and it was quickly decommissioned after Washington State. But for the most part, you can see vestiges of 99 in all three states, given that the state highway numbers often match the corridors. And in Oregon specifically, you had the long jogs of US 99 West and US 99 East, which pretty much run a good percentage north-south through the state. So really, We're talking about like I-5 being the main highway through Oregon today. US 99 certainly would have been in the past, and you had two branches of it for the most part through the majority of Oregon.
And most of Oregon, you can still drive either current or former 99 as a standalone route, which is not the case in. I mean, California has a substantial section of California 99 remaining. Washington, much more of it is on I-5, but really Oregon, it's almost all separate from the freeway. So it made sense for it to remain a U.S. highway in Oregon for as long as it could.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like you look at like the Rogue River, you have I-5 on one side of it and 99 on the other. It's pretty much a continuous highway through the entire state.
Yep. Updates on baseball: Jose Iglesias and Robinson Chirinos have both signed. Iglesias with the Rockies, Chirinos with the Orioles.
All right, another hitter that the Yankees can strike out 4 times.
Yep.
Hooray!
Yeah. Iglesias would have been better, but oh well.
All right.
Back to the roads.
Let's see here. You know what? Before I go any further, hang on. I'm going to... Well, I can't do this, can I? Alright. Well, I'm going to assume that everybody can see this presentation. I was having internet connection issues earlier today. I think they were resolved before we went live, so I hope that they're behind us.
You hope that we're still alive?
I hope that we still are live, yes.
Oh, right.
So hopefully that's the case. Yeah. Laura, text us if our connection goes down, will you please? Thank you.
She can only do that.
She just said, "Don't hate on my O's," so I'm assuming we're still live.
Well, okay, I see that. Yeah. All right. Well, Laura, if our connection goes down, text me, please. Thank you. The O's are still terrible. Yeah. Let's see. Other honorable mentions here. We haven't really talked much about the Washington side of the ledger, but there are a couple of east-west freeways there of note. There's the 14, which...
14 is a wonderful highway.
If you continue the 14 further east,
Yeah.
it forms a northern highway along the Columbia River Gorge, which is a very beautiful highway from what I've heard. I did not really experience it outside of Metro Portland, but I've heard that it's a really nice drive. Yeah, I know. And then there's also the 500, which is another east-west highway in the Vancouver area. The 224 is known as the Milwaukee Expressway. It's not really an expressway in terms of what you would see in the eastern states, but it's a major divided highway arterial that serves the eastern suburbs and the southeastern suburbs, really, of Portland. I think it runs eastward from the 99E corridor and then serves the eastern suburbs out that way. It interchanges with I-205.
It might be an expressway. I'm not seeing any driveways on it and very limited side streets. So.
Yeah, there are traffic lights on it.
Yeah, it might actually be an expressway.
Yeah, I would say it's still an expressway. It's very, very close to what you would think of on the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, East Coast uses the word expressway to mean freeway, but
right
from the application of engineering, it is actually what you would describe as an expressway, sort of like NJ 129. So, yeah, it counts. It gets honorable mention.
Oh, Mr. Angry is back.
Ooh.
Well, we've held off on talking about unbuilt highways in Portland until now.
Yeah.
And we also have to talk about highways that existed in Portland that no longer exist anymore. Yeah. Portland was a landmark city. They were the first city in America to remove a well-established expressway/freeway and replace it with green space. So we're going to talk about the original Harbor Drive Highway, which is part of the original US 99W corridor. I think the two other really important ones to touch on here are the Mount Hood Freeway and the Rose City Freeway that you see I have listed here on this slide.
I think Prescott's important. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all part of the same corridor, more or less. But you notice, so if you're looking at the map here on this slide, the roads that are painted in red are the ones that were ultimately built. The ones that are painted in green are the ones that were proposed but not built. So you can see very prominently in the center of this map, you can see the Mount Hood Freeway corridor very well. And also the Prescott and the Rose City freeways also listed here.
Where's the words Rose?
Well, it's actually, I lied. The Prescott is labeled very well up here, but the Rose City is this arm down here.
Oh, right, the remainder of the 405.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now the 52nd Avenue is one I actually, only a couple of years ago, I read a lot about. That apparently that got very strong support and opposition. That's not one I really knew much about, because I knew mostly of the east-west ones, but apparently 52nd was actually a major part of the unbuilt freeway history here.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at, we've talked about how the east side of Portland is different from the west side, like how the river is really a dividing line between the two.
Yep.
But you notice how there was this grid of freeways that were planned for the east side of Portland that just, most of it just did not come to fruition for one reason or another. And that does have a ripple effect, right? Like now we see the 205 carrying the traffic it carries. We see the Banfield 84 corridor carrying the traffic that it carries. All of that traffic was intended to be siphoned onto these supplemental highways that you see that are painted in green that, obviously as we see, were not did not come to fruition. Yeah.
You mentioned Portland Western Bypass. You didn't show it on that map, so.
Well, you can't really show it on this map, though. Yeah. I'd rather wait to another slide.
Okay.
But like this slide here.
Yeah.
So we mentioned how, since you mentioned it, I'll start here with the Portland West Bypass.
Right. The continuing 205 outside of.
So kind of what happened was there were a lot of different options explored for the West Bypass Highway. One of them was to just extend the 217 corridor. That is a terrible line to draw, but just bear with me here. I've had a couple glasses of wine.
It's okay.
Yeah, I know. I've been told that multiple times in the last calendar year by people who don't know shit.
Absolutely.
Would you like more wine, sir?
Not really.
Okay. See, Tom, this is the benefit of tuning into a live episode with us, because you just never know what's going to come up in conversation.
What's the most interesting to me about what we're seeing here is that at least one of the east-west freeways is shown as built that was never built. We'll get there in a bit. We'll start. Let's keep going here.
I think what you're looking at there is a difference between existing and proposed.
No, well, let's finish on the west before we start talking.
Okay. Well, would you shut up for 30 seconds,
No.
please? Okay. So the West Bypass, I've highlighted the two most likely paths for it. There would be new bridges over the Willamette and Columbia Rivers involved here, so it would be a very expensive adventure. Also, you have something going on out in this area, that you don't have elsewhere, which is the mountains. This is a very mountainous area in West Portland. It would be very difficult to punch a new freeway through that terrain.
So in this one, the 505 would have gone to the Western Bypass if they were able to build one. Not just St. John's Bridge. They're showing the red line going up.
Oh, I see what you're looking at there. Yeah.
Only if it was built would they have extended it that much further, I guess.
Well, if there was a Western Bypass to tie into, then I could see how that would make sense. Yeah.
But yeah, what I was talking about, you can see on the right also Mount Hood Freeway is shown as existing or committed freeway.
Yes, the key word there is committed.
Right. They were committed to that and still never got built.
So in 1969, the federal government gave their commitment and funding for the construction of the Mount Hood Freeway, and it was contingent upon approval of the city of Portland. Mm-hmm. And of course, the city of Portland, well, they dropped the ball. But the federal government was on board with it. The state of Oregon was on board with the Mount Hood Freeway proposal. Really, it only needed the blessing of the city of Portland in order for it to go ahead. And the Portland freeway revolts of the late 60s and early 70s put an end to the Mount Hood proposal. Tom, is there anything else about this map that you want to talk about or mention real quick?
I mean, it just kind of speaks to why it's so difficult getting around Portland. It's kind of got a lot of similarities with Seattle and what wasn't built and how that impacts the overall traffic patterns of the area. So it seems kind of a similar thing with a lot of the West Coast cities. Is a lot of the corridors are difficult and they got a lot of resistance.
Yeah, Portland is not a very easy city to navigate, especially on the western half of the city, like west of the river.
I kept talking before about how I would have put 84 continuing more on the north side and then tying into 405 interchange, but I guess under this commitment they would have taken, what you had highlighted, they would have taken 84 south along 205 in on Mount Hood and made the Banfield just US 30, I guess?
Yeah, that's what would have happened. Yeah, there would have been a more lengthy overlap between 84 and 205. You make an interesting point that if you continue the line across, 84 seems to more seamlessly tie in with the north end of 405 instead of the south end.
If they had built that, I think that would have been the most logical place to put it.
Yeah.
But they didn't commit to it, unlike Mount Hood, which they actually committed to that.
They made a commitment. It's just that the south end of 405 was deemed more critical under this plan. Yeah. And the Markham Bridge was the central cog in all of that. Yep. Yeah.
Apparently the bridge just north of Markham was also shown for improvement. Hawthorne Bridge there.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I don't know what they were proposing. They never improved anything else.
Well, that's true too. This
be nice to have something on 30 bypass too. At least more than what they have now. It's not really all that great of a bypass.
It's not really a bypass, is it?
No.
I thought that was very strange. Like when I was researching the St. John's Bridge, and it was coming up as 30 bypass, and I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would there be a bypass over there?
I've clinched 30 bypass, and it definitely does not function as a bypass of anything.
Yeah, it's just very strange how they did that. Yeah. Kind of like how US 90 and US 90 Business are assigned in New Orleans. Like US 90
Business is a freeway, right?
90 Business is the freeway, which makes absolutely no sense, but that's how they roll in New Orleans. Yep. So, whatever. Tom, have you ever been to New Orleans?
I have a couple times, very, very long time ago, but yeah, it's wild. It kind of reminds me of like the Lodge Freeway. Like for a long time, I believe that was like business I-60, I-96, 696. I mean,
yeah, Business Spur 696. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was like their half-hearted attempt to include the Lodge in the interstate system. And then they were just like, well, fuck this. Yep. We'll just...
kind of like what you got going on California State Route 51 still being signed as I-80 Business today.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not signed as 51, even though there's a small piece of 51 that does not overlap any other routes.
Yes.
We have talked a little bit about the Mount Hood Freeway. And I'm bringing back this image in the lower right of this slide that you saw in the earlier part of this presentation to further illustrate the point of where the Mount Hood Freeway would have tied into the downtown loop at more or less its southeast corner at the east end of the Markham Bridge. This would have been a freeway running east out of downtown, supplemental to the Banfield Freeway, which had been in place for several years by the time that this highway proposal really picked up steam. It would have intersected I-205 at its eastern end. It's hard to say really what would have happened east of there. Really, the city of Portland and Oregon officials were prioritizing the section from the Willamette River to I-205. That was the part that they saw as the most critical. long term beyond that, they saw a potential realignment of the entire I-80N corridor away from the Columbia River Gorge. And that was their true idea of I-80N. But for the purposes of this webinar, we'll just be focusing on the section within the city of Portland, which was known as the Mount Hood Freeway. Long parts of this would have been elevated. Long parts of this would have been double-decker. Mm-hmm. It would have been, if they had actually been able to build it, it would have been one of the great engineering challenges.
I think it's interesting, the lower left corner, because it doesn't look like that anymore, but that looked just like in Boston, where the inner loop would have tied into what's now I-93 and was then the I-95, 93 area. So
yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. So the Markham Bridge, when it was built in 1966, was built deliberately with that stub in the lower right of the lower left-hand image. That space would have been taken up by the lanes merging in from the Mount Hood Freeway. The Markham Bridge was built in 1966. The federal government had given its conditional approval for the construction of that freeway in the mid-1960s, before going all in on it in the late 1960s. And so the bridge was engineered to include that connection with the relocated interstate corridor that Portland, the Oregon DOT, and the Federal Highway Administration had hoped to construct, which you can see in this rendering in the upper left of this slide.
More recently, they widened I-5 and got rid of that stub entirely. So
yeah, so long story short, the city of Portland could never agree to an alignment that they liked for the Mount Hood. They looked into several different alignments that you can see on this slide here. The city of Portland just did not want this freeway carving up the east side of the working class neighborhoods of their city limit. So the Mount Hood Freeway ultimately died. The stubs that were there were ultimately incorporated into wider roadways for I-5. There is still one stub on I-5 that is still there for the Mount Hood, and this is if you're heading south on 5. This is after the 84 merge. This is before you make the right turn onto the bridge itself. But there is a ghost ramp that goes off to the left if you're going south. And this would have been the ramp connecting southbound 5 with the eastbound Mount Hood Freeway.
That's interesting. They actually show so much of the alignment in the map. Like they were really getting ready for it.
They really only needed the word go from Portland.
That's so interesting.
I mean, they were that close. And this study is from 1972, so they were ready to put shovels in the ground for this thing.
And then New York ruined it by causing them to have to go to environmental review. Thanks, Cross Bronx Expressway.
Well, I don't think that was the Cross Bronx, was it?
The Cross Bronx really was the impetus that started the revolts against that actually being built where it was in Crotona Park. Led to the environmental process being initiated in the end of the 1960s that would kill things like that in the 70s with the city opposing it, whereas if that had happened 10 years prior, it probably would have gotten built.
Yeah.
And Josh Harrison is now with the White Sox.
I don't know who that is either.
Wow.
You're not naming any big names.
No names.
The one part of the Mount Hood Highway, or the relocation of I-80N, that did see the light of day is this small, isolated, fragmented section of highway well east of the 205. Out in the appropriately named municipality of Boring.
I've been there.
I'll bet you have.
It is.
And there are hints of a potential westerly continuation of this highway towards the city of Portland itself. It is signed today as part of US 26, so you can drive it today. But this was meant to gradually make its way into the relocated I-80N proposal, which was what? Yeah, it's there. Yeah. There's some stubbery there.
That's what you got in the photo, I guess. On the right, but I didn't realize that actually there was grading for that freeway to continue straight out of it.
Yeah, so long.
Significant.
Yeah, so while ODOT had prioritized the stuff within the city of Portland, long term they had proposed that I-80N, which is now, of course, known as I-84, should be relocated away from the Columbia River Gorge on a new alignment. So, they intended for those two highways to eventually connect to each other, which I don't think we're going to ever see happen. So that's the end of that. I teased this a little while ago when we were talking about the lower deck of the Fremont Bridge, and there's a slip ramp to Kirby Avenue at the north end of I-405 that doesn't really go anywhere. Well, it was actually intended to go somewhere, and this would have been a freeway connection, or freeway extension, rather. I'm not really sure if it would have been signed as I-405. I haven't been able to see if there was any truth to that.
I remember I got on from Kirby Avenue specifically because however 405 is defined, you were better off going straight across I-5 versus using the I-5 interchange. Even if the ramps just count as ramps, the actual definition of 405 follows these ramps at least to the center line of 5.
Well, you think so?
They may or may not actually be part of 405, but I specifically remember including them in my clinch to make sure.
Now, I should say in response to that it is entirely conceivable that had the Rose City Freeway been built, it would have been signed as I-405.
Yeah,
because it would have terminated
to anything else.
If it terminates at I-205, then it makes sense, right?
I don't know.
No, I mean, if it fits the designation of 405, right?
Or could it become part of 84 also?
It could have been signed as I-969Q, for all we know.
That would be a New York thing.
Well, that's a Texas thing, isn't it? So the Rose City Freeway was intended to run east to west across the northeastern suburbs of Portland. Provisions for it were included and incorporated into the design of the Fremont Bridge on the Willamette River. Very little of this freeway remains other than the two ramps connecting to Kirby Avenue, which they themselves were a compromise with the local neighborhood. If we go to this next slide, in the left-hand photo, you can see an overhead shot of the Fremont Bridge I-5 interchange, which is very complicated. And yes, if you look at this image, you might say, well, yeah, it looks like there should be a freeway that continues off straight to the upper left corner of the picture. And you are correct. That is what the Rose City Freeway would have been. Generally running east to west, connecting the Fremont Bridge with the area around PDX Airport. This is another one of those east-west freeways that was intended to supplement the Banfield Freeway that we've talked about already, with how overloaded with traffic that highway is. This would have been another relief route for that. And it's another freeway that City of Portland fought viciously in the 60s and ultimately won the day. So the Rose City Freeway doesn't really exist today, other than these little connecting ramps that you see today. All right, Thomas. Harbor Drive time.
All right.
Time to wake you up from your nap.
Oh, no. I could use the sleep. Could always use a little extra sleep.
I know you're enjoying our entertainment here, Steve and I. But would you care to talk about Harbor Drive and the US 99W and kind of the basic gist of Harbor Drive as a freeway and why it no longer exists today?
So, US 99 west through downtown Portland was originally aligned on 4th Avenue and 6th Avenue. So this was expanded into what was known as Harbor Drive, which became a primitive freeway by 1950. So the real hook with Harbor Drive is once I-405 was nearing completion, Harbor Drive was kind of surplus as a freeway, and just given its older stature, there was a big push to have it removed, and eventually it was in the late 1970s. There you go, you got the time frame for it right there, 1943 to 1974. And it became a park which runs along the Willamette River right now. But this would tie into like even the Steel Bridge and the existing alignment of 99W before Harbor Drive was even built. So it was even signed for a time as Interstate 5 until that alignment was built. So if kind of completely gone. But if you're driving that grade of the park, you're basically on the freeway grade of Harbor Drive in downtown. The name of the park's eluding me. Tom McCall Waterfront Park. You're pretty much on a freeway grade walking through that park in downtown.
Harbor Drive has been sort of like the West Side Highway in New York, where they took out most of that freeway. Now in that case, it was elevated and dilapidated. In this case, it was at grade, so you weren't running into structural issues. It was just actually removed, which is so interesting. The interchanges were interesting. The routing was interesting. It fascinates me that they considered it surplus at that point.
Yeah, and it's kind of neat because you could see where it went under the bridges, and really, it aside from wanting a park down there, there's really was no real reason to remove it. I guess the park was what they wanted.
It should have been I-905 all along.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should emphasize at this point that Portland was the first city, or the first major city in America to go through the steps of removing a major urban freeway like Harbor Drive. Yeah. They really set the precedent for
proving how green they are.
Well, not only that, but also demonstrating how valuable riverfront property would be in the last years of the 20th century and as we move forward into the 21st century. How the attitudes have changed between the post-industrial years of the 50s and 60s and on through today's world. Portland was really a battleground for those two mentalities coming together, and how Portland kind of set off in their own direction by saying, you know what, we don't really want to adhere to the standards of yesteryear.
I really like the photo on the right because you can see I-5's land is cleared and you can see all the ramps getting built for the future freeway there.
Yeah, I suspect this photo is from the late 50s, the one on the right. Really, both of them might be, because I don't see the Markham Bridge in the left-hand photo either.
One on the left,
you can see
the cars look at least late 50s, if not early 60s.
Yeah. But you can see how Harbor Drive was really the main thoroughfare through downtown Portland when it was built.
You can see how it connected with the Steel Bridge there on the river.
Yeah.
Right. So the north end of the freeway tied into the Steel Bridge, which took you over to the east bank of the river, which then continued up by US 99 up to the Interstate Bridge, which would take you over into Washington State. So yeah, that kind of that created a seamless corridor there. Yeah.
Yeah, surprising how old that bridge really is, but I'm assuming we'll get to the Steel Bridge later on.
Yes, we will, young man. This is another slide about the Western Bypass Highway that's been kind of brought up over the years. I won't spend much more time on it here, but really the two things that you should take away from this are there are two main streams of thought. There's, and this thing is not cooperating with me for some reason. Let me do this, maybe. Alright, this will work. So there are two main streams of thought. One of them is utilizing the original 217 alignment through the west suburbs like that. The other one is utilizing a more broad corridor that swings much further out to the west.
Well, what you showed before with 217, it would have swung west with 30 a bit and really gone more around that part of Portland. So they would have both crossed the Willamette in much the same area either way.
Yeah. I suppose the thing also, so there are two main roadblocks here, right? There are mountains in the way and there are also rivers in the way. And so that, of course, adds a lot of billions of dollars to any cost estimate for any project along these lines. I say to anybody who says that a Portland West bypass is feasible, good luck. because the political appetite is not there. Oregon and Washington State DOTs are more focused on the replacement of the Interstate Bridge, which we will talk about momentarily. And we actually have some news on that project to share with you tonight that was not available last week. And hey, speaking of which, look at this. Right on cue. We have our Bridges of the Columbia River slide. How about that, huh?
I recognize that mountain.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the New Jersey High Point Monument, isn't it? No comment from Steven. Okay. We're only going to talk about the bridges on the slide here that are right in metropolitan Portland.
Ooh.
There are many bridges on the Columbia River that are worth talking about. I would love to talk about bridges like, the Umatilla Bridge and the Longview Bridge and the Astoria Bridge, but we're unfortunately not going to cover that in tonight's presentation. I have saved those bridges.
You're not even looking at the Columbia River on this slide.
No, we're not. No, that's true. You're correct.
Confusing and concerning. But...
See, I don't think this is a big deal because when I create background slides for PowerPoints, I try to be inclusive. I'm using that word. I try to be inclusive. Okay. I try to pick a shot that is inclusive of what I think the entire city and metro area represents.
You're showing us bridges, but not on the Columbia, so.
Well, it's an offshoot, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't include it,
Boo,
right?
Boo.
Mr. Inclusiveness over here. Okay, who says I'm not inclusive?
I do. I've crossed the Columbia River more times than you have, apparently.
Tom, would you like me to get in trouble right now with a rant about inclusiveness?
If you want to segue onto it, I think I'll sit back and be entertained by it.
I think we should just look at these bridges.
See, thank you, Steve. Thank you for shutting up and letting me continue with this PowerPoint.
US 101 has the best bridge across the Columbia, but we're not going there, so fine.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, well.
I'm
Bridge
saving all those
pretty
bridges
nice.
for a potential future webinar for the Columbia River bridges. Maybe we'll do that someday.
Fair enough. This is the one I was booing because it's so boring.
I would say this is probably the most ordinary of them. The 205 crossing from
205 is ordinary and boring.
Well, I mean, you say that.
I say that.
But the backstory
it's very boring.
Is a little bit more interesting. But Glenn Jackson is the namesake of this bridge. He was a businessman by trade, but he got into the transportation planning business. And he was a 20-year member of the Oregon State Highway Commission, which became known as the Oregon DOT. He eventually rose to the rank of, what is it here? He was, I can't find it. He was he was chairman of the Oregon State Highway Commission. That's what it is. Which was an appointed position by, apparently the governor of Oregon appoints that position. Because the governor of Oregon doesn't do shit otherwise. So he was chairman from 1962 until his death in 1980. The bridge on the Columbia River that carries the I-205 designation was under construction at the time, and it was named in his honor. Glenn Jackson oversaw the construction and planning and direction of roughly 700 miles of freeway in the Portland metropolitan area and the state of Oregon in general. He basically was the guy who took the Robert Moses plan of 1943 and made it a reality.
And for all that, they gave him box girder.
They gave him a precast concrete box girder bridge, yes.
That's sad. You do all that, and that's the best you get.
I know, I mean...
As I said, that's why I'm booing it.
I know.
Not booing Glenn Jackson, I'm booing the bridge.
I would like to say that the reason why this bridge looks so ordinary is because of its proximity to Portland International Airport.
Yeah. So they had to keep it below the.
They had to keep it under control, as I
Yeah,
like to say.
yeah.
They couldn't have bridge towers. They couldn't have really extravagant things that could potentially upset the FAA. So they built a rather low-key bridge at this location, which is understandable for its location. But it gets the job done. It's there. If you're hanging out in Portland, this is not one of those bridges I would recommend you check out, but it's there.
Yeah, I guess they weren't worried about it having too much overhead clearance there, so they didn't need to get it like 200 feet above the river. So it's helpful.
No, the Columbia is not nearly as.
Here's a yay.
Yeah. Well, you like old bridges.
I love the Interstate Bridge. Love it.
Steve, you love the Interstate Bridge, don't you? Would you like to talk about the Interstate Bridge for
Not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, you showed the 2 years when they had the original one built, predating the U.S. highway system, became part of 99. Then they twinned it early on. It actually was, even the newer span was still 99 for a couple years before they started signing it as I-5. But they built the newer bridge very faithfully compared to the older one. And now, over 100 years old, it's one of the at least top 5, if not top 3, oldest bridges on the interstate system. I know the Bulkley Bridge in Hartford is still older, but this is way, way down there.
Yeah, so the original Interstate Bridge span dates to 1917,
Yep.
and I think, while with the pending removal of one of the bridges in Kansas City on I-70, it's definitely on the podium as far as oldest interstate highway bridges in America.
Yep.
This is a very long saga that, again, I'm going to try to summarize very quickly for you guys here. The original bridge was built in 1917. It was twinned in 1958 and added to the interstate system as part of I-5. And ever since that moment in 1958, Oregon and Washington officials have been at a loss for what to do about this bridge.
Now, does it still operate as a lift span?
Yes, it does.
All right, so they haven't fixed it. Okay.
It's absolutely operational.
Very
Yep.
nice.
In fact, I missed out on a couple of lifts when I was out there in July of 2021. Really, the state of Washington and the state of Oregon knew in the late 1950s that this was nothing more than a temporary bridge to carry their new I-5 corridor, and yet it's turned into something a lot more permanent. Really, the conversation about a new bridge in this area intensified in the 21st century. There were a couple of different iterations of this. One of these was the Columbia River Crossing proposal, which was in the early 2000s. The state of Oregon was on board with replacing the twin span interstate bridge with a new twin span bridge, but the state of Washington balked at this idea, owing to the fact that it did not account for other alternative modes of transportation, such as light rail and pedestrian access. So they backed out of the agreement. Of course, one of the complicating factors with the replacement for the interstate bridge is the fact that you would need bi-state approval.
Yep.
The state of Washington has their own interests involved, whereas the state of Oregon might have different interests going on, and so that has prolonged the process. So the Columbia River Crossing project died an unceremonious death in 2013. In its place in 2017 came the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, which was launched in 2017, utilizing a lot of the original renderings from the failed CRC proposal. It is the hope of both Oregon and Washington state officials that a compromise agreement can be made along the lines of somehow securing funding for this new bridge. And in fact, we have news kind of on this front within the last 7 days as I record this on March 12th, 2022. The Washington State Legislature, in their most recent session in Congress, approved $1 billion of funding. This was signed into act by Washington Governor Jay Inslee. They approved $1 billion of funding towards the funding for a new interstate bridge. However, it is also contingent upon the Oregon State Legislature taking up the measure. However, supposedly, at least according to this source, the body is adjourned until 2023. And my question to that is, what the fuck are they doing over the next 9 months? Like, really?
Smoking some good marijuana in Portland.
You know, that is one thing I will say. Portland has some good weed. I will say that.
But what's interesting, the most interesting about this is that Washington has $1 billion set aside, but this is part of the original interstate system. So the funding for the new bridge should be 90% federal. So are they saying that it's going to be $20 billion? Because $1 billion from Washington assumes $1 billion from Oregon. I don't think it's going to cost $20 billion to build this in any format. So
yeah,
I think they've gone way overboard with the amount they actually are going to need to spend.
So the most recent estimates for cost of the replacement Interstate Bridge twin span, and on this slide, you're looking at renderings of the original CRC proposal from about 20 years ago. But I suspect that a lot of the newer engineering models would revert back to some of these proposals from the early 21st century rather. The cost estimate for the Interstate Bridge program ranges anywhere from $3 to $5 billion. That depends on how much transit is implemented into the design and how much transit is accounted for in the design but not necessarily built into the initial construction.
So if it's $5 billion, if it is 90% federal, in theory, Washington should only need to pay $250 million.
So there's a very wide range of potential costs for this bridge, right? $3 to $5 billion is obviously quite a big difference. Like, thank you very much for providing this very intricate cost estimate.
But then also, I suppose the transit aspect of this might be pieces that the federal government wouldn't sponsor.
So one of the reasons why the original CRC plan failed was because Washington and the state of Washington itself was not happy with the lack of light rail transit that was designed for the replacement bridge, because they want to be tied into the Oregon and the Portland max light rail system. And so they were very unhappy when Oregon left them out of the system. They wanted in. And they said, well, no, we're not going to approve a new bridge that doesn't have max light rail capacity built into it. And so that's how the CRC proposal died in the early 2010s. With the restarted Interstate Bridge program of 2017, there seems to be more movement towards at least building in capacity that light rail could be added to the bridge post-construction, post-year zero of operation. If you would like my personal take on this, as an engineer for Tappan Zee Constructors from 2013 to 2019, we built such a bridge over the Hudson River. The replacement bridge of the Tappan Zee, known as the Mario Cuomo, was built with rail transit.
Cuomo.
Yes, thank you.
Fix the signs.
That bridge was built with rail transit in mind. You don't necessarily see it when you drive across it, but there are components of the foundation and substructure of that bridge that are designed to incorporate future loadings for rail transit. And I suspect that something similar could be implemented here with the Interstate Bridge. You build an incredibly robust foundational system for a new bridge that can accommodate light rail or even maybe heavy commuter rail.
When you're looking at these photos, there could potentially be rail systems beneath the lanes.
Oh yeah,
and there's 25 feet or so of clearance there is the perfect height for it if that's what this is designed for.
Oh sure,
all of these have that deck that length, so it's a possibility. As opposed to being ACT-rated, might all be considered on a second level.
And I do think there is something to the fact that Washington State has initiated the funding move in this part of the process because they were the ones who killed it the first time around. And so I think they do want to make nice in this case. And I do think that ultimately that's the direction you're going to see this project go in, that you're going to see state officials agree to build a bridge that isn't necessarily capable of handling light rail transit when it opens, but the infrastructure and the loading capacity is already built into the bridge so that they can easily add tracks and add light rail at a future date once services are agreed upon at a year to be determined. But really, the fundamental concept here is that they have to get I-5 traffic off of the existing interstate bridge, and that seems to be the motivation behind any replacement proposal at this point in time. What they do with the light rail, they can decide later. But hopefully they adopt a strategy like Tappan Zee Constructors and the New York State Thruway Authority adopted in 2013 when they agreed that mass transit is, in a way, secondary to taking interstate highway traffic off of a dilapidated bridge that shouldn't really carry it anymore.
Hey Dan, what's the plans for the interstate bridge spans tied in with all this? I'm assuming this is the same location, right?
Well, I would imagine that the existing interstate bridge would cease to exist.
Yeah.
As you're looking at the renderings here, this new bridge would be built high enough that bridge lifts would be a thing of the past. So this would be a very tall bridge compared to what's already there. And maybe that's something that doesn't really come through with these renderings, but it seems to me that they would be building a much taller bridge that would eliminate the need for drawbridge movements and stuff like that.
Either substantially altering, eliminating the interchange that's just across the river, or you would end up having to put down ramps that could have draw spans on the ramps while the main line doesn't. All to be finalized if this sees the light of day.
I've seen a proposal where one of the original interstate spans would be kept for local traffic.
Yeah, it's plausible because it's again, there's interchanges very close along the river that if you're going to go down if you're going to go up this high to avoid the draw span, you're going to seriously impact the ability to have the interchange.
Yeah, so I wouldn't close the door completely to the entire original interstate bridge being removed, but
they're not showing it. So.
Clearly the focus here is on relocating I-5 away from a drawbridge, away from a bridge that predates the interstate system, let's be honest. And then what you do with transit can be worked out later between Oregon and Washington officials. You know, as long as all those conditions are met, which really isn't all that much, but, you know, we've seen plans for this new bridge fall through in the past, so.
At some point, the 1917 bridge is going to really reach the end of its life. It's a truss bridge, but it's also seeing interstate level traffic with heavy trucks, so it can't be living that much longer. So that hopefully it gains traction this time.
So as an epilogue to what I said, the Washington State Legislature has approved funding.
Yep.
And under a best case scenario, this project would start construction in 2025.
We'll see.
I mean, if they're very ambitious about it, they could make it happen.
We'll see.
But we'll see what happens. Stay tuned.
All right. One more bridge before I guess we take a short break.
We'll take a short break after this.
Yeah. Let's finish the Columbia River.
Burlington Northern Railroad. So there are two bridges on the railroad that I want to talk about. One of them is on the Columbia River. The other one is on a river to be discussed later. Both of them were built at the same time as part of the same railroad corridor between Vancouver and Seattle. The BNSF Railway was commissioned in this area in 1908. This is a movable bridge. If I go to the next slide here, you can see the movable span front and center. This is a swing bridge. So it sits on a center turntable and the span rotates about the center turntable to an angle of 90 degrees to allow shipping to pass through either side of the turntable. Very self-explanatory bridge. All the other spans on this bridge are straightforward truss spans, built in a very cookie-cutter fashion to facilitate quick assembly and all that other good stuff. This is the furthest most downstream span for railroad traffic on the Columbia River. There are no railroad bridges west of here.
Makes sense.
That's about all I got for this bridge.
Okay. All right.
Tom, did you have anything for that bridge or not really?
No, they're all pretty similar. So there's like a whole bunch around the Portland area. They're all built around the same era. So they all kind of have a similar design to what you're seeing with this one.
I have been across the next bridge west on the Columbia, but it is a very, very decent distance away, so it does not belong here.
Mm-hmm.
And then 101 is the only other full crossing of the river west of there. So
Yeah.
I guess since we've been on the air 2 hours,
You want to take a voice break?
that's not a whole lot of baseball to talk, but you can fill in the gap there for a few minutes.
5-minute voice break.
All right, so until 8:15, here's what we've got. We've got Joe Kelly reportedly went to the White Sox bullpen. Nico Goodrum, who I've never heard that name before, but he's with the Astros. Luke Mail, who has spent some time in the majors, is with the Cleveland No Longer Indians. Chadwick Tromp, I'm pretty sure, is not going to be in the majors, but he's now with the Braves. And Miguel Diaz, which sounds like a name that could be a number of different players, is a pitcher with the Tigers. So I'm going to hit refresh here, but right now that's the latest on any of the names I see here. Most of these, most of the major names still haven't made it to sign with anyone. So what I've been reporting so far for the last 2 hours, that's what we've gotten. It's picked up a lot more in the evening, at least, than it has in the first 24 hours of free agency. But at this rate, I think we'll make it safely through the rest of the presentation before the other shoe really drops. Tom, what do you want to talk about for a minute or two? Oh, Tom took a break. All right, I've got nothing else to talk about.
The floor is yours, young
No
man.
I mean, this is usually right around the time that we go for maple syrup weekends in New York. So since I am in this part of New York on a weekend that is typically a maple syrup weekend, you can see if there's any headliners there. New York State Maple should be happening right now. Let's see what I can find that's close to you here.
Would you like me to talk about the Tennessee Titans? I have something Titans news related.
One moment. We are... I don't know how well you know the towns around here, but apparently just east of you, there is Fresh Air Fund Maple Farm.
Which town is this in?
And it's not even a town over. It's just outside of this town.
Which town?
The Fresh Air Fund Shark Reservation in Fishkill, New York, offers.
That's not east
stuff.
of here.
It's a little bit east of here.
That's mainly south, but go ahead.
Maple Celebration. Discover the wonders at the Fresh Air's annual Sugar Maple Celebration, March 26th. So, all right. Up to 1,300 people might attend and sample some syrup.
If you are still watching this video and you have not already determined that this video is bollocks and it's absolutely not worth watching, then please give it a thumbs up, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the channel.
If you think Alps is cool, you're absolutely insane. But...
Well, I agree with that, but I was going to say, if you would like to hear Alps talk more about the Willamette River bridges in the next segment, make sure you make your voice heard in the live chat right now.
I'll do the best I can, still dealing with major head trauma, but speaking the best I can, so. White Oak Farm in Yorktown Heights, that is south of here, but the next 2 weekends they're doing Maple Weekends, so... those are the only ones in down. Those aren't the only ones in downstate New York, but it sounds like the next 2 weekends, Maple fun for everyone.
Maple fun for everyone. So the MD Roads crowd should make a trip up there.
I think that would be ideal.
Alrighty.
This is the thing you guys don't get being on the West Coast that I do miss is maple syrup because you don't get any of it out here,
we
and the stuff you do is crap.
Here. Yep. You go no more than 500 miles from here, and you can't even find maple syrup. You just have
Nope.
the former Aunt Jemima, whatever they call her now. But That's the best one you get.
What do they?
think
What
she's
did they
calling
change
it
it to?
Jessica
Actually, I
now.
forget.
Yeah, it's something. Whatever it is.
There's a bunch of memes about Uncle Ben becoming like Uncle Ben from Spider-Man.
Oh man, he also changed his name. I don't know.
What did I do?
No,
I think it's just called
Ben.
Ben's Rice now. If I remember right.
I heard Uncle Dan. I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
what did I do?
No. You ain't got no scrub. So it's 8:15, so we could. That's been our 5 minutes of Zen.
Yeah, so, alright, so I'm sure that my mother, who was watching this earlier, will have turned this off a little while ago, because she would have decided that this is bollocks and not worth watching. So,
Especially that bridge in the foreground. Utter bollocks.
you really want me to throw you out of the house right now, don't you?
That bridge?
The one in the foreground
is
there?
utter bollocks. 'Cause it's light rail. Counts for nothing.
Tom, should I even go on to the next slide at this point, or what should I do? What do you want to do?
If we're getting to the steel bridge, let's go.
Do you want to
one-
talk about the steel bridge, right?
It's the one everyone should see in Portland. It's the steel bridge.
Well, you know what? In order to get to the steel bridge, I'm going to have to go through
Go
this
through the
bridge
slides.
that's in the foreground. So you know what? I will fight through this guy's objections to that bridge,
Yeah.
and we will ultimately get there. So the list that we're going to talk about for the Willamette River bridges is, as you see here. I've picked these bridges because I photographed all of them. This accounts for all of the bridges within the city limits of Portland, and there are a couple others as well out in the Oregon City area that we'll talk about as well. So I'm going to try to be as comprehensive about this as I can. I know I won't possibly hit on every single one, but
Yeah, this was a good one.
I like this Oregon City Bridge.
I visited this with my family in 04, and I came back to it a couple of years ago to get better photos of it because it's still so cool.
You know, this is, we were alluding to Bob Ross earlier in this show. This is a happy little bridge.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Like his second and third wives, a much happier time in his life.
It was built in 1922. It's been on the National Register of Historic Places for about a decade or so. This bridge can be best described as a prototype bridge. It was engineered by a gentleman named Conde McCullough,
Oh, yeah.
who became most known for his work on the Oregon Coast Highway, which is today U.S. Route 101. The bridges along that highway are just spectacular. I know Doug is going to yell at me because I have never actually driven US 101 along the Oregon coast, but if you get the chance to experience US 101 and all of its bridges and all of its glory, do it because it's apparently
This is
fantastic.
still better than almost all of those bridges, though. This one is truly magnificent.
This one's not
This
bad.
one's very nice.
Right? Yeah, I agree. I should also mention real quick that the Oregon City Bridge is located immediately downstream of the Willamette Falls and the Willamette Locks, the oldest navigational locks in the United States. So they say on the internet. Doug is not. Where is that son of a bitch? He's not here tonight.
He's out there.
Doug is somewhere photographing pine trees in Oregon, and I need him here on this broadcast so he can fact check all the bullshit that I'm telling my audience. But I was going to say that the Willamette Falls locks are the oldest navigational locks in the United States. I have no idea if that's true or not.
Are they older than the Erie Canal?
Well, that
There's
would
no
be the
way.
implication,
They're
right?
older than the Morris Canal? There's a lot of canals in the 1810s and 20s.
Doug!
Not here, yeah.
Where the hell are you? Stop
Yeah, that
taking
can't be.
care of
That's
your
got to be a
mom.
West Coast
Your-
thing.
Your mom is stupid. Pay attention to our webinar.
These could be the oldest locks in the West Coast, yeah. I'd be surprised if they're that old. But they could definitely be the oldest ones in the West. I would give them that.
Yeah, that seems more
People
accurate.
weren't out there in 1810.
And I'm gonna pay for giving his mom shit.
Oh.
You watch.
She'll come over here. Yeah.
Doug's mom will come my house,
Definitely.
I'm sure. Interstate highway bridges. Well, you can kind of tell that this might be one of them because of its plain design. The Abernethy Bridge came into use in 1970 as part of the I-205 corridor. It is named for a fellow named George Abernethy, who was the governor of the Provisional Government of the Oregon Country from 1845 to 1849, and was later a prominent Oregon City businessman. As we said before, Oregon City was the western terminus of the original Oregon Trail, which many of you have died of dysentery and cholera on over the years.
All my friends.
I used to name my characters Dysentery, every one of them. So dysentery would die in dysentery.
Yeah, I probably should have done the same thing myself. The interstate highway bridges over these rivers, especially the Willamette River, were the first bridges to receive experimental seismic retrofit programs. We'll talk about the Markham Bridge in a little while, but the Abernethy Bridge was another one of these that received seismic retrofit dollars in the early 2000s. We haven't talked much about the Cascadia subduction zone. We talked about it more with the Seattle presentation a few weeks ago. But Portland is still in that earthquake country that belongs to this Cascadia subduction zone region.
Generally not as impacted by them as Seattle is. But yeah, just still within that range, yeah.
Yeah, so Portland would be subjected to a very large earthquake. You may imagine an earthquake maybe 50 miles off the Pacific coast, epicenter wherever, maximum magnitude of 9. That would have a significant impact, even on an inland city like Portland Metro.
Yeah.
So the interstate highway bridges in Portland Metro specifically were the first bridges to receive retrofit upgrades, and the Abernethy Bridge was one of the first. The Markham Bridge was another one, but we'll deal with that in a little bit.
We're still on the boring highway there.
This is not as boring a bridge.
No, but 205 is just boring. This is better.
Yeah, you're on this anti-205 tangent.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
I know. You're very,
That's just me.
They should put tolls on that 205.
I've already driven it.
Just
so I never
just
need see
to,
it again.
just to piss you off,
I don't need to ever drive it again. That's fine.
Well, you don't seem to want to drive it again, so what difference does it make?
Good.
Okay. You want to put a toll road on 287 in New Jersey, too. I'd like to see that happen. Just to see what your reaction would be.
They already tried adding HOV lanes, and that didn't work out. So
Yeah, well, that didn't go very well either.
It's not happening. It's all right. Sellwood, this is a bridge I am not familiar with.
Tom, I would like to see a toll road put right in front of Alps's driveway so that no matter which way he goes, he has to pay a toll. And then I would just like to see his reaction to that.
I'm just shocked he lives somewhere where he doesn't have to pay tolls in New Jersey. Seems like everywhere I go, you have to.
Yeah,
New Jersey, you don't.
Yeah, he lives in the one corner of New Jersey where he can get away with it, basically.
Oh yeah.
And of course, he's Alps, so he knows all the Shunpike routes anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So he doesn't have to pay $1 in tolls anyway, even if he lived in toll country. The Sellwood Bridge is one of those we should spend a moment on, because the bridge you are looking at right now is not the original bridge that has existed back to the 1920s. The current iteration of the Sellwood has existed since 2016. It replaced an original deck steel truss that went back to 1925. If I go to the next slide here, you can, this picture in the upper right shows you how expansive the current deck is. It's got sidewalks, it's got bikey-wikey lanes, which I know you like, and it's got travel lanes with shoulders and all that good stuff. The original Sellwood Bridge, as I said, was built in 1925. It was engineered by a gentleman named Gustav Lindenthal, which is a hallowed name in 20th century bridge engineering, design, and construction. The original Sellwood Bridge, however, was deemed inadequate as far back as the year 2000. Inspections in the early 2000s deemed the bridge inadequate due to cracking in the concrete foundations and whatnot. So Oregon officials, and specifically Portland City officials, went about the process of designing a new bridge for the site, the construction of which began in 2013. It was completed in 2016. The pre-existing Sellwood Bridge was therefore demolished and is now just a memory. And now we're left with this bridge, which I have to say, architecturally is a vast improvement over the bridge that was there before.
Yeah, this is nice compared to the old one. The old one was actually ugly for its era, which is surprising given it was the 20s.
Do we have a photo of the old one or no?
I didn't put a photo of the old Sellwood in this.
It's a truss design, Steve, and it's not a very attractive one.
I think all trusses are attractive,
this one manages not to be.
I do think it's interesting though that we had two bridges in Oregon City. The next bridge are all the way up in Portland, which was the Sellwood. Like there's like 15, 20 miles of nothing before you. That was a little surprising.
Let's see here. Tom, do you have any notes on these bridges other than the steel bridge?
Well, I got some more up north towards Portland.
Well, we're in Portland now, young man.
Oh yeah.
Do you have
more up by the Markham Bridge?
We're about to get towards the really ugly, stupid bridge. So.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about the really ugly, stupid bridge.
Oh, Sellwood was an underneath truss. Never mind. Yeah, that's boring.
Yes.
See, thank you.
I didn't realize it was
thank you
truss.
for
Okay.
knowing. Thank you for coming to a judgment after you know the facts. Okay. We see this. But never mind.
We're good. We're good.
Ross Island Bridge, folks, was built at practically the same time as the original Sellwood Bridge. It was built in 1926. It nowadays carries U.S. Highway 26. I'm sure that's a coincidence. This is another Gustav Lindenthal engineered bridge. It's named in honor of Ross Island, which itself is named for Oregon Trail pioneer Sherry Ross, who was an early landowner and early land developer in the area that became known as Portland. He occupied a settlement in the middle of the Willamette River that became known as Ross Island. And the bridge passes near the north end of the geologic formation that we now associate as Ross Island itself.
So this guy really liked his underdeck trusses, apparently.
Lindenthal was an artist.
I disagree. Overdeck trusses are exciting, like the Interstate Bridge. This
one's better than the last one, though.
I would say
this one's substantially better.
Driving on this is boring.
I would say that this bridge is a vast improvement on the original Sellwood. But yeah, there still isn't a whole lot to see if you're driving on it. Yeah, I agree. One other thing I'd like to mention before we move on is that in the late 1950s and early 60s, all of Portland's bridges... I'm burping a lot because I've had a lot of wine, probably. A lot of the bridges on the Willamette River in downtown Portland were painted the same color. Basically, it was a black or a gray. And one particular individual, an architect by the name of Louis Crutcher, had the idea of essentially personalizing each of the bridges on the river, giving them each their own paint scheme. And so in 1961, he approached the city of Portland. He said, hey, let's give each of these bridges their own paint scheme. Let's repaint them each a single color to make them each stand out from their neighbors and whatnot. And so the Ross Island Bridge was repainted in the early 1960s in this blue color that you see today. Officially, the paint color of this bridge is described as phthalo blue, which I would disagree with because it's too light of a blue to match a Bob Ross painting. But, I don't know. People have different definitions of exactly what tints of blue belong where.
We're not in Boston, we're important, so.
No, we're not, but the color phthalo blue comes up quite often if you are a follower of the joy of painting. Just saying.
I'm a follower of the aggravation of being terrible at painting.
You're a follower of being very aggravating sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's that.
Boo! Boo!
All right, now I'm going to do something that I didn't want to do at this point.
Kick me out.
No,
Okay.
I'm this close to doing that, though. I swear to God.
Cutting you off from your wine now.
I'm gonna give Steve the floor to
Nope.
talk about this bridge because apparently he's got a lot of pent up anger towards this bridge, and I would like him to get it off his chest. So please go ahead.
I actually parked on one side of this bridge early one morning and walked almost all the way across, but then turned around and walked back because it was so boring I just couldn't go the whole way. But I actually did walk this bridge on the pedestrian side, so...
Well, I have too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've not ridden the Portland Max Light Rail or the Metro bus over this bridge, but
as much as cable stayed bridges annoy me in general, I did, because it's above the bridge, it's something to see, I made sure I went out there and gave it the old college try. So.
Did you just say the cable stayed bridges annoy you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you can go fuck yourself.
I do that often. That's time for a different webinar. But...
Join us next week.
Yeah, this one's a bit of a pain in the ass to get to. I went to the west side of it because there is parking there, but you have to really make a bunch of turns to get there.
It's not that hard. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it was like 5 or 6 turns off the interstate to get around.
Purposely inconvenient
You
is
see,
the
this
just
guy
feeling I
is
got.
so apt at navigating one way or another. He can't figure out how to get to the west end of this bridge.
I figured it out just fine. It's just more complicated than most of the other bridges to have to deal with.
Oh my god, what am I gonna do with this guy? Anyway.
I just think it's a boring design. Like it's just.
But you too.
Seems like everybody's
really?
doing. Like
what
everybody's
is-
doing
what
this
is
whole
with
thing,
you
this
people?
cable stay stuff.
You guys,
It's the
you
same
guys
thing.
hate this cable stay stuff. Like really?
Yep.
Everybody's
my
doing it now. It's
goodness.
boring.
Yep.
It's like the new age boring.
I like the arch bridges. I like suspension bridges, truss bridges, just not cable stay.
You look at that design, Steve and Tom, and you think that's boring? Really?
I like the bridge.
It's
next
not
to it.
exciting. It's not exciting.
What is not exciting about that? Like
It's
seriously.
it's gray and it's bland. Like it's just no
What is bland
nothing to
about
it. This
that?
is
There's
like
nothing
screaming
bland
like
about that.
we don't like roads in Portland
Majority
kind of
the
design
people
thing.
On this webinar do not like this bridge. Sorry.
Well, I
You're
think a
outvoted.
majority of the people on this webinar are full of shit. Like that
I
is
haven't checked
that
today,
is
you're
that
right.
is ridiculous.
There
That-
might be some shit in my system. I'll make sure to get it out. before
well,
this-
I know there's some shit in your system.
All right.
All right, I've known that for several
Cool
years.
is cool and funny.
Tom, I'm very disappointed in because he should know better. Like I just don't know him that well. You know, Tom, I'm not angry at you. I'm just disappointed. Okay, Steve.
It's the
I
it's
know
the
he's
color,
up-
Dan. If it was like a cool color, I'd feel different. But the color is really killing it for me.
See, but Steve, I know.
Tom, I like you. You're a good guy.
Steve, I know is full of shit from all my years of dealing with him. I don't know you as well, Tom. So I'm gonna kind of give you the benefit of the doubt, even though I really don't want to.
Oh, yeah, see, you got the drone out here and everything.
Okay, well, thank you for at least giving me some credit for that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, of all the bridges you got the drone on, you picked the most boring one. So.
I mean,
I just remember being in what is the one in Jacksonville? Steve, do you know the name of it? The one that's
I wanna
is
say
like
Duval, but I might.
yeah.
that is
Like
not
that-
the name of it, but okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's the most boring one in Jacksonville, though.
How is
Like,
that?
it's just-
Oh my goodness. You know, we're going to have to do a Jacksonville webinar one of these
All
days.
right.
I'm going to have both of you on here. I'm going to put a picture of that
There's
bridge
so
on the
little of
screen.
Jacksonville worth seeing in a webinar, though.
I don't disagree with that, but that is the one part of Jacksonville that is worthy of being on a webinar.
Constructing
So,
795 would be the only interesting thing.
oh, shut your mouth. That is absolutely not the most worthy part of Jacksonville. That's
No, there were a
being-
couple of
being
bridges
on.
downtown, but
downtown,
Yeah, like
the bridges
cable
are pretty
stay
nice.
bridge that you guys
no,
can't
there were a
wait to-
couple of cool bridges downtown.
No, but
There
I
are
can
two.
think of one
There are
downtown.
two.
There's one downtown that's worthy of mention. The other one is that cable stay bridge out
Yeah.
east that you guys can't wait to rip left and right.
I sure can.
Yeah, well,
Well,
I
you
know
got-
you can.
You've got the drone, so.
Oh my goodness,
But
jeez.
look, you even waited to get the light rail in the photo just to show how boring this bridge is. If this allowed cars on it, it would at least be remotely interesting.
You guys just don't like the fact that I've engineered one of these in the past, and I've actually reviewed the design calculations for cable tensions.
I don't
and all that
like
shit.
it because my company ended up losing that one. So
Well, that's your problem, isn't
it's
it?
not. No, I wasn't involved with that.
But you're guilty by association, though,
No.
aren't you?
Every cable stayed bridge I've ever seen is the most boring bridge I've ever seen.
Tom is the one I'm really disappointed in because he does not have these professional connections. I mean, he's looking at a bridge like this and he's calling it boring.
Yeah.
Tom, I'm very
But
disappointed.
you-
in
I like you, Tom.
But Dan, you should have known. Like, think about like all the bridges like I go for. They're not this modern stuff like this. This is too modern for me.
I think
Yeah,
you need. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
you need to get with the times. Anyway,
No way.
Oh, Juris Familia is in agreement with the Phillies. That's new.
well, they can have them.
That's at least a name we know. So
Yeah, all right, I've heard of that name.
Mets say goodbye. Phillies say hello.
So the Phillies are taking all of the Mets' trash. Okay, that sounds good. All right. The Tilikum Crossing came about. Remember how I said that Oregon and well, not Oregon, but the city of Portland. I just about called it the state of Portland. I need another bottle of wine over here.
Yeah,
okay?
I think you've had enough wine. I think you're good.
The city of Portland has really invested a lot of money in its light rail transit and its mass transit system in general, whether you include the light rail or you include the bus rapid transit
This
system.
is why we're booing, but that's all right.
And so they approached the state of Oregon in the early 2000s about building a new bridge on a new alignment to aid in their development of these new rapid transit corridors. And the construction that began in 2011 and ended in 2015 resulted in the bridge that we have today, named the Tilikum Crossing, which is a nod to the Native American civilizations in the local area. The bridge was named after the local Chinook tribe word for people. So you could say that this bridge is named the Bridge of the People, which is
Called
one
Till
of
I
the...
Come because as long as you stare at this bridge, you're never going to. It's just not going to get aroused that way.
I you know,
As soon as you
I'm...
leave this bridge, you'll be more likely to.
I know that you're just going out of your way to rip this bridge now, Alps, because you know how I feel
No,
about
I
it,
actually,
and
when I visited my sister and saw this bridge, I actually made that exact joke about the bridge name too. So I've been holding on to this joke for a few years.
wait, what would say this one more time?
That's the Till I Come bridge because as long as you're dealing with this bridge, you're not going to come. So
And you want me to have you on future live shows.
I'm the one who's willing to say this on the air.
Yeah.
So.
Is there anything else you would like to get off your chest?
No, I think the next bridge will be much better. So
How about the next slide? Do you like the next slide any better?
nope,
No? What if I go to the previous slide? Do you
Nope.
like that one?
nope,
No?
no.
What is it that you have against cable stay bridges? I'm
They're just
very,
boring.
very, very curious
I like
to know.
suspension bridges better. That's all.
Why would you ever, in God's name, want to build a suspension bridge here?
You have the tall piers. It's very similar, but it's just prettier.
Have you considered subsurface considerations
I
and
like-
cost
I like
in your
To
estimations?
me, straight lines are boring. Curves are more interesting, and this is all straight lines.
What is straight lined about that roadway? There's absolutely nothing straight about the
Cable stay
roadway.
bridges are all straight lines for the structure.
Do you think
That's all.
that they shouldn't be?
I like curved lines. Arches.
I mean, I
suspension
like
bridges,
curved lines too, but I wouldn't like it if those cables weren't taut.
That would be more interesting.
You,
Leads
you
to some interesting phenomenon if that
yeah,
happened.
yeah, you would say that, wouldn't you? The cable stay design. I'm gonna restrain myself from punching Alps in the face right now.
Because you're gonna fall over if you try to get up.
Go fuck yourself. Anyway, construction was completed in 2015. It was the first new bridge to be opened across the Willamette River in the Portland metro area since the completion of the Fremont Bridge in 1973. So that's almost 40 years. between new alignments of new bridges on the Willamette River. That's a pretty impressive gap there when you consider how many bridges actually span this river. Oh, and can I say before we move on to this next bridge that
no.
I actually think that this is my favorite bridge on the Willamette River.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I know you're not.
The only thing I'm glad is that you're still pronouncing Willamette correctly, and Tom needs to learn.
Well, see, I got a master class from Doug not very long ago, and I haven't forgot it quite yet. So
See, that's the funny thing that, like, if anyone reads the Gribble Nation blog series, a lot of the times I don't even know how to pronounce the things I'm writing about.
Yeah.
I find out about it in these webinars.
I do love me some Markham though. So
Yes, this one's pretty cool.
Oh, so you like this one? Okay.
Yes, the double deck. Yes, it's
when
pretty
you're
cool.
on the upper level, you can see all the bridges to the north, and when you're on the lower level, you at least can see all the trusses. So
you can't
both
see
levels
shit on the lower level.
No,
What are you talking
It's
about?
like the George Washington. You at least see all the structure around.
You can't see shit on the George Washington lower level. The only redeeming quality of the George Washington is either on the pedestrian side or on the upper level. There's absolutely no redeeming quality to the lower
There's
level.
beams. There's all beams.
Yes, beams that get in the way of your beautiful view.
Yeah,
So
but
anyway.
the upper level is nice.
You
because
have
can
no
see it.
such obstructions on this bridge.
Yeah,
There's no beams that get in the way of the pedestrian overlook or the traffic flow on this bridge.
So you could just
have nothing
lift
but
people up
steam.
and throw them into the river, right?
I would rather see you do that,
I could
frankly. I would like to see you do that.
do that. Okay,
Yeah.
let's both go there. I'll throw you into the river.
You know what? Screw you guys. I want to go back to this bridge for a minute because I forgot to mention, because you guys couldn't wait to jump me on this bridge, that this was actually the first bridge in America intentionally designed to carry transit only.
Yeah.
It was not designed with passenger cars in mind. It was designed only for bus rapid transit, for the Portland light rail system, and for a robust pedestrian and cyclist system. And as you can see on the outer edges of this bridge, you have ample space for pedestrian and cyclist facilities. And I know that this specific topic has been one that has been debated.
The fact that it allows
over the
buses
years.
on there is what makes it unique. That because obviously there's plenty of bridges that are rail only or rail with pedestrians, but the fact that this has a roadway but doesn't permit vehicles other than those transit vehicles is what makes this unique. And why it annoys me, because if I could drive it, I'd like it a little better, as I said.
Yeah, that's a killer for
I
me
had
too.
to walk it, and it just killed me that I had to walk it. I was stuck on the. I actually did walk in the middle at times into the roadway and dealt with the possibility of being hit by whatever. But
Well, I wish they would have run you over.
then I wouldn't be here to talk about Tilikum.
I'm not sure that that's a good thing.
I don't know.
I'm not very happy with you right now, Alps.
Well, I think we should try to get this over before midnight. So let's go to the next bridge.
I kind of want to leave the slideshow on this for the rest of the night.
Well, then it's over. That's sad.
I did promise Tom I would talk about the steel bridge.
Alright, so mark one.
Let's see here. What do I want to say about the Markham Bridge? And that is how it's pronounced, people. It's Markham.
Not Markham, it's Markham?
It's Markham.
Okay.
Yep. And I found this out
So
after.
you have Tilikum and Markham next to each other. All right.
Yeah.
So Mark went ahead and did it. That's up to him.
This bridge is named in honor of, as I try to steer back in control of this webinar, it is named in honor of Philip Markham, a state legislature and Multnomah County judge, who owned much of the area of South Portland that's now known as Markham Hill. This area is now home to the Oregon Health and Science University and the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in the state of Oregon, which is now located in the south side of Portland. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but you will recall the eastern end of this bridge was intended as the eastern beginning of the Mount Hood Freeway, which was originally signed as Interstate 80N.
And all that's left of that now is that last pier at the coast you can see is a little wider. But they removed the roadway stubs when they widened I-5, so You no longer have stubs. You just have the slightly wider piers where it would have taken off.
I also mentioned seismic retrofits. This is the single busiest bridge in Oregon as far as daily traffic counts are concerned. So the Oregon DOT fast-tracked a seismic retrofit program to this bridge in the 1990s, which was completed in 1995. It was one of the first large-scale seismic retrofit programs implemented in the state of Oregon. And as Tom said before, this is a double-deck bridge, so it's awesome just on that count. This bridge also, by the way, caused quite an uproar with the city of Portland itself. Many of the people of the city of Portland were not too happy with this bridge's appearance and its design, and that had ramifications down the line, as we'll talk about. With a bridge still to come.
Okay.
Keep that in the back of your head, in the back of your mind, or whatever.
I'll keep it in the part of my brain that wasn't operated on.
I said to myself I was not going to bring that up during this show, so I'm not going to do it. Tom, do you have notes on the Hawthorne Bridge?
Built in 1910, vertical lift span. Very similar to, the steel bridge. Kind of cool. Like, if I remember right about it, I haven't been on this one in many, many years. You had the rail span in the middle, then you had like a lane of traffic on both sides of the rail span.
I took a lot of photos when I crossed it a couple years ago.
It's a very neat structure.
Yeah, I made sure I crossed it both ways. I did one on the outside and one down the middle just to get it all. So, right, if it was rail, it's now just roadway for both.
Well, I think there was, before the light rail and before the interstate system, there was a trolley system.
Yeah.
And that occupied the inner lanes of this
makes
bridge. Sense. Yeah. And then the trolley system was discontinued. Robert Moses came in and said, fuck you. And then they built the interstate system, which made the trolley system redundant. There was some talk about routing some of the Portland light rail system onto this bridge in the 90s and 2000s. But they ultimately settled on building a new bridge on the river, which is that hideous, ugly bridge that we talked about a few minutes ago.
Yep.
That's how that bridge came about.
Yep. Good, we're in agreement.
Yeah, I mean we agree with that aspect of the story, but you guys are still full of shit when it comes to the design of the actual bridge. I cannot believe that people of your standing at GribbleNation.org and AlpsRoads.net, you guys think that bridge is absolutely horrendous.
I mean, I'm the only person.
It would be, Dan, it would be so much better if the bridge was painted green. If the cables were green, I'd feel so much better about it.
I've never seen a green cable stay.
Now, so that I can actually get on board with. I do agree that there is some room for improvement as far as the paint
I will
schematic
say,
and stuff like
one
that.
thing which I didn't say before.
I don't want you to say anything right now. I want you to shut your mouth.
Nope, too bad. I like the Delaware 1 cable stayed bridge. I like when it's a single row of cables in the middle of the bridge.
Well, that's also a different paint scheme, though.
No, but for some reason, I don't like it when it's on both sides, but I actually do like it when it's just down the middle. I really like that one bridge, so I guess I do even like some.
See, but I think that the differing paint scheme there corrupts the experiment.
Oh, it's so beautiful at sunrise or sunset.
I mean, it is Sunshine Skyway Light, that bridge.
It's magnificent. But
I don't disagree with that.
Let's look at this one.
Would you like to talk about the Morrison Bridge?
I have nothing to say because driving over it's boring. All the stuff's below it.
Yeah, the harbor, where you can see where you interact with Harbor Drive, that's the best part of it.
The Morrison Bridge, I'll speak for these two clowns since they don't have anything to say about it. The Morrison Bridge was built, this is the third iteration of the Morrison Bridge. This one was completed in 1958. Named in honor of John Morrison, who was a Scottish immigrant who was one of the first to come across on the Oregon Trail with westward expansion. He was a prominent landowner on the east side of Portland and he gave his name to what's now known as Morrison Street, which is a prominent main thoroughfare across East Portland.
Oh, Alex Colomé has just gone to the Rockies.
No one cares.
That's a name I know.
I don't, so screw him. The Burnside Bridge. You may notice a little bit of a resemblance between the Burnside and the Morrison bridges. They both kind of have a similar blueprint to them. The Burnside...
This one looks like it could be in a number of other cities, for that matter. This looks similar to some in Florida, for example.
Yeah, it does have that... there's a very specific term for that.
Between the concrete piers with the houses on them, the thickness of the bridge overall, and that the way they've designed the arch in the middle,
Yeah,
it looks a dead ringer for other areas.
yeah. The term
It's pretty nice.
The term for those little lift bridge houses there is Italian Renaissance style architecture. The Burnside Bridge was built in 1926. It's named for Dan Burnside, who was a local businessman in the Portland area and was a proponent of the original dredging of the Willamette River in 1866 to make it navigable for ocean-faring marine traffic.
And influenced the name of C. Montgomery Burns on The Simpsons.
I have no idea
Really?
if it's true or
The
not.
Simpsons took a lot of their names from areas around Portland, and this is the one that led to Mr. Burns.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's
If
neat.
anyone would know, it's my brother-in-law when he was living there. So
If you're bullshitting me,
no,
then
no, that's legit.
you think that's legit?
That is 100% legit. Yep.
Okay. Something else that's legit about this bridge is that Gustav Lindenthal also served as a consulting engineer on this bridge.
Not surprised, all the trusses underneath.
It's just another one of those bridges,
Yeah.
right?
I like McCullough a whole lot better. Just saying.
Well, McCullough certainly had a much bigger impact in the state of Oregon. There's no doubt about
His
that.
bridges to me look better. That's
Yeah.
alright.
This is the Burnside Bridge looks to me like an older, more artistic version of the modern day Morrison Bridge that we just saw.
Right.
You get the on the west side of the bridge. You have the Portland Saturday Market under there every week,
Oh yeah.
right on the
In
freeway
what used to
grade.
be freeway.
Yep.
Yep. So now we're up to Iowa.
All right, Tom. I promised you we would have a steel bridge slide in here, so go for it.
So this bridge, the steel bridge, I find this thing just fantastically hideous. Like that's why I love it.
Oh, boo.
It's just so ugly that it's great.
Boo.
It's like so unique looking.
It's
Anyways, Steel Bridge opened 1912, and basically the Union Pacific Freight and Amtrak stuff is on the bottom, and the road stuff is at the top. It has a 163-foot clearance when the lift span's raised. And I just look at it. I mean, like, this is just stands out as just being so hideous compared to the other bridges in downtown Portland that I love it. It's just so great because of that.
I thought it was in Iowa. I'm looking for it now, but there is a bridge just like this in the Midwest. Very, very similar. And I love this bridge. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch this thing go in action, though.
It looks, I live in a state where you still find a lot of these, and until this year, the Whitpen Bridge was one of them, and there's just a bunch of railroad bridges in Kearney, New Jersey that look just like this. I love this bridge. Absolutely.
There was what is the one in Duluth, Steve? The transit bridge that they converted into one of these things.
Yeah.
What is it called? It looks a lot like that. This
There's
one.
the aerial lift bridge that takes you onto the peninsula there.
I think that's the one. Yeah.
They just call it the aerial lift bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. So the steel bridge, as Tom said, was built in 1912. This is a bi-level bridge. Of course, in the picture in the lower left, it's in its lowered position. I did not get to witness a bridge lift for this thing, but I'm told that it's a really interesting experience. The lower deck carries railroad and bicycle pedestrian traffic. The upper level carries 2 lanes of roadway, the Portland Light Rail Max Line. So you could say that between its light rail, its Amtrak, and well, it's not CSX out that way. It's what, Union Pacific, I guess?
Union Pacific.
So it's light rail, it's passenger rail, it's heavy freight rail, it's also roadway, it's pedestrian, it's bicycle. You can say that this is one of the most multimodal bridges on Earth because it handles all of those different modes of traffic.
Yes, you get everything on this bridge, and it was part of US 99.
Yes, it was, Tom. See,
Another plus.
This PowerPoint was designed with you in mind because there are a bunch of references to US 99 in this PowerPoint.
Almost like I made a US 99 page or something.
I may have a couple of those too.
Yeah, some.
Yes, you do, Steve.
Yes, I just might have taken all of 99 from end to end and posted about it.
Yeah, some clown on GribbleNation.org created a US 99 page not long ago.
You didn't have permission, I guess, from certain people, but that's a story for another time.
You have the old style of Oregon speeds that are not limits.
Yeah, so we didn't mention the Oregon speed limit sign.
Well, it's not a limit. If it just says speed 25, it means you can go faster than 25 and not get pulled over. They've since instituted speed limits, but still some of these signs remain out there.
Right. The speed 25 is an older generation that's being phased out. Yeah.
Technically, the road may be designed for that, but you could go faster if you want, and they can't stop you.
Watch me go 120 like I did on Texas Route 130.
I should have gone 130.
Well, I should have. Let's see.
Well, speaking of that, speed limits, Portland and Oregon in general, are really low.
Yep.
Especially for the West Coast.
Yep. Portland is
probably way too low.
25. Noticed that.
That is unacceptable.
Yes. It is.
Mr. Challenger over here, yeah.
Broadway is a nice one because it's all steel, but it actually forms curves with straight lines, which is rare for a truss bridge.
Yeah, so the Broadway Bridge is a unique style of bascule bridge. So this is the main shipping channel here. And you see how it's in the closed position in this slide. These two spans are actually meant to rotate up like that. See that? They open up like that. So that's how the Broadway Bridge gets into an open position as opposed to the closed position. And this is a very rare example of a two-leaf bascule bridge. There aren't that many bridges like this anywhere on the planet. But this one was built in 1913. Built at practically the same time as the Steel Bridge, just upriver. It was Portland's first bascule bridge. There were other ones that would follow upriver, like the Burnside and Morrison bridges. It's supposedly the longest span of this type of bascule bridge on Earth. So that may not be saying that much because there might be only like 2 or 3 of them.
That are two-leaf as opposed to one, yeah.
Two-leaf, yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty rare.
Yeah.
There are a couple,
But this is a very visually appealing bridge.
Yeah.
Very mechanical looking. Also, the Portland light rail has been implemented into this bridge's carrying capacity over the years also. So there's a couple more.
This one looks like you got your drone for it, so that's nice.
I did break out the drone for these, before I was chased off by the city of Portland police.
Jeez. How dare you celebrate their bridges?
How dare I legally take pictures of bridges using an aerial camera? Like, hey, you might want to pay more attention to those Antifa protesters downtown than what I'm doing with these pictures. See, I'm glad you find that funny, Tom. At least one of us does.
Yeah, that's wild. That whole story.
I
but-
mean, listen, I know we're not going to get into all that. I said we're not going to go down this rabbit hole,
Excellent.
but, I mean, good Lord.
Excellent.
I mean-
No rabbits.
You know...
All right, Fremont Bridge. Again, I love the Fremont Bridge because you can see all of the downtown bridges as you cross it.
So, if I may say at the onset, if you imagine a Formula One style podium for the top 3 favorite bridges in the city of Portland, this is one of those podium bridges for me. Another one of those podium bridges is that bridge that you two find absolutely hideous. So that's another one. We'll talk about the third one of this
I like
club
this one.
later.
I,
All right,
I
well,
like
we
the
agree
Fremont
on
Bridge.
that.
The
Okay.
Fremont Bridge is great.
All right, that's fine. The Fremont Bridge was completed in 1973. It is effectively the northernmost stretch of I-405. I talked about, or I teased, that the Markham Bridge really ignited a lot of anger with Portland officials.
Yeah.
Specifically, if I can find it here,
Yeah, I would have
The-
loved the suspension bridge.
the Portland Art Commission really took offense to the original design of the Markham Bridge, and they were really upset that that was the design that was chosen. So the city of Portland actually yielded to them, and they allowed them to take the lead on the design for the Fremont Bridge, which at the time, in the early 1960s, could have been any one of these 3 designs that you see on this slide. You see a cantilever design at the bottom, which would have been basically a larger scale version of the Markham Bridge that was ultimately built. The suspension bridge idea in the middle of the slide was a really interesting concept. And also you have the arched design. Notice between all 3 of these examples that each of them feature a double-deck concept. City of Portland, Oregon officials were convinced very early in the design process that the best way to proceed here was with a double-deck bridge design. So these were the 3 finalists for the design of the Fremont Bridge, and you will never guess which one was ultimately chosen.
You're right, because we didn't see the previous photo of it.
That's right, you did not see the previous slide,
Right.
did you?
Right, or the next slide, or driving it myself, or anything.
That's right. So this double-deck bridge was built in the late 60s, early 70s. Really is relatively underutilized, I would say, in the sense that the connecting freeways to it on each side of the river were not fully completed. We talked about the Rose City Freeway on the northeast side of the city that was not built. We also talked about what was proposed at the time as part of I-505.
Yeah,
that wasn't
yeah.
built either. So you kind of have this bridge tying into these half-completed interchanges at each end. So it carries, I would say it carries significantly less traffic than it was designed to carry, but that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world.
Unlike most of the other freeways, this one actually carries the right amount of traffic for its number of lanes instead of being ludicrously overburdened during rush hour. So, because they never built those additional freeways, this actually remains appropriately designed. It's not overbuilt by any stretch. It's the right design.
Yeah.
So 405, at least the northern part of 405, is relatively free-flowing, but not it's still relatively decently traveled. It's not empty.
You know, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Verrazano Bridge in New York City. How that bridge is huge, right? Like it's 12
14.
lanes. Or it's
Now it's
13.
Yeah.
13.
Now it's 13.
The Alps 13th lane.
Yep.
And
I did design that lane myself.
And
yeah.
part that's why I mentioned you. But part of the reason why that bridge works as well as it does is because its connecting highways on both ends weren't really completed
Right.
to their extent.
Right. So the
Yeah.
backups on both ends, but the bridge itself has enough room.
The bridge itself is fantastic. Yeah. Right.
Well, you see the same thing now with the new bridge across the Tappan Zee that the highway on both ends is where the bottlenecks are, so the bridge itself is relatively free-flowing.
Yeah, that's true. Especially that bus lane that nobody uses.
Oh, yeah.
But that's another rant for another day. The flagpoles. I want to mention the flagpoles on this bridge really quick.
This is an impressive drone view, by the way. You got that close to it.
You know, you like these drone pictures,
I
don't
do.
you?
You impressed me with the drone use.
See, Steve doesn't dislike every single picture in this slideshow. Okay.
I like most of them.
I aim to please, So there are two flags, as you see. Well, there's actually two flagpoles. The flagpoles were installed as part of the bicentennial celebration in 1976. Obviously, the one flag is the U.S. flag. The other one is the state of Oregon flag, which was not flying at this particular time when I visited the site.
I wonder what my website has on it.
I've seen a bunch of pictures with both flags up, so I don't know if that was just a temporary thing or if Oregon wanted to secede and join Canada on that weekend. I don't know, but
You mean the state of Portland?
the state, yeah, yeah. Or no, that was Seattle that tried to do that, right? Like, didn't they try to create their own republic or something stupid like that?
The Chaz or Chop Zone and Capitol Hill.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, speaking of, law enforcement, paying attention to drone flyers. Hey, why don't you go tend to that instead, okay?
What I remember, wasn't that okay by the mayor or something? Something weird like that?
You're gonna get me off.
I had both flags when I traveled.
You're gonna get me off on a rant here, Tom, and I really don't want to go there. But let's just say that you're right. That is true, and I am not in favor of it. Let's just say that. One thing I am in favor of is deepening river channels and deepening river basins to allow for larger ships to pass through. And one of the things that comes up as part of this sometimes is the need to enlarge our movable spans on bridges that already exist. Mm-hmm. We talked about another Burlington Northern Bridge on the Columbia River a few minutes ago, but this one on the Willamette River has been vastly altered since its original construction in 1908.
I assume originally all the spans looked like the small ones.
The original Willamette movable span looked a lot like the original Columbia movable span.
Yeah.
It was replaced in the late 1980s with the vertical lift span you see today. But yeah, like that area that now possesses the vertical lift component, that was the original footprint for the movable swing span. And everything, I've been taught that everything that I read on the internet is true. So I'm going to tell you that according to the internet, the swing span on the original Willamette Bridge configuration was the largest swing span in the world for its design.
At its time, probably.
Well, obviously not anymore, right? Because it's no longer with us. But the Burlington Northern Bridge on the Willamette River was severely altered to coincide with the deepening of the ship channel here to accommodate larger and more frequent seagoing traffic into the port of Portland. And this is, again, it's a very active bridge. You can see freight trains on this bridge and Amtrak on a daily basis. So it was important that this bridge be kept open during all these retrofits, and that's something that you can read about on your own time if you like, because that was a really interesting
here we
undertaking.
go.
Oh, have I finally piqued your interest?
I mean, this is by far my favorite bridge in the entire Portland area.
Okay, well, I can see that.
Took me a long time to get to it, but yep, bypass 30.
Yeah, well, I would say, so the three podium bridges, right?
Each of us may have different podium bridges, but
Yeah, well, I know there's one that you're not including.
I'm just saying this is my absolute favorite.
I'm just saying, there's one bridge on my list I know you two aren't including.
That's
so.
all right. This one is this in your top 3?
This one, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
So we can agree on that, right?
As I said, I love suspension bridges. This is the only one you got, so.
This is
still quite a design.
This is an absolutely beautiful example of bridges as art.
Yep.
Right?
Yes. This one's great.
The St. John's Bridge was built in 1931. It was the largest suspension bridge west of the Mississippi in the United States when it was built.
Yep.
It was
built
it was
101 one.
Which one did they build on 101?
They eventually built one, but I think it took to the 60s or 70s to build it. So this would have held it for a long time.
Or until like the Golden Gate.
Golden Gate's probably not as long.
Excuse you?
Golden Gate's wider.
Is it?
Excuse you? What?
It doesn't feel that long.
Excuse you?
Doesn't.
Oh. Wow. I'm going to slightly disagree with that comment.
I don't know.
And I will say that...
The facts are whatever they are. I'm just saying Golden Gate, to me, it never felt like it was that long. This one feels like it's long.
Yeah.
It feels long when you run it, Steve. It's about 1.5 miles from what I remember.
Okay.
At least with counting the approach spans.
Have you run that bridge, really?
Yeah, I've run the Golden Gate many times.
Do they have like a regularly scheduled run on that thing, or?
No, I would park out by the batteries and just run across the Marin County and back.
Oh, you're talking about like running the actual pedestrian path.
Yeah, they got a pretty wide one on that bridge, so it's pretty easy to do.
And it was not terrible, but
anyway, we're gonna save this in-depth analysis for the San Francisco webinar, and we're gonna turn our attention back to Portland.
The Golden Gate is number 18 on the list, just behind Verrazano.
What are we talking about right now?
I'm just looking at American bridges. Those are the 2 longest ones. So.
Yeah, well.
All right, so yeah, Golden Gate is up there. That's fair.
Yeah, well,
Fair.
Yeah, okay. The St. John's Bridge was one of the renowned design achievements of the engineer David Steinman, who came, I suppose that his crowning achievement was not until the 1950s when he was the lead designer for the Mackinac Bridge in Michigan. But he had a role to play in a lot of different bridges across the United States and Canada. I would say that this one in West Portland is one of his greater achievements as an engineer. As I said, it's one of the great examples of integrating engineering sufficiency with art forms. And he did it in an area that, as you might be able to tell by these pictures, is not necessarily conducive to combining the two, because this is a very industrial part of the city. But it works, and it's beautiful. And it's
your bypass.
It's your US 30 bypass, yeah.
It had a nice old shield right there before the first tower you can see in your first picture.
You walked on the bridge a little bit there, which is dangerous.
I did, yeah. This is a very inadequate sidewalk, by the way.
It's not a sidewalk at all. They call them safety walks, and I don't know why, because it's nothing safe about being on there.
Yeah, I was actually kind of sort of fearing for my life on this sidewalk, so yeah. I would not... Just stick to the drone, people. Just stick to the pictures I got, like the one in the upper left.
I drove it relatively slowly because it was either pre-dawn or post-dusk, and so... I think it was post-dusk, and so I had to go slowly to make the photos take properly, so I just had to hope nobody came behind me at like 55 miles an hour and slammed into me going 20.
Apparently, this is one of only 3 suspension bridges in the state of Oregon.
Yep.
I don't know off the top of my head what the other 2 are, but
I want to say 101 is one of them.
I didn't think there was one on 101.
I thought the one that goes into Washington has a suspension span.
No,
that's all press.
It's not.
I thought there was a suspension span there. Right?
So I'm not sure what the other 2 are, but I'm sure that my trusty sidekick over here, Mr. Anti-Cable Stay Bridge, will come to a conclusion on that. Tom, you've been pretty quiet on these bridges. Is there anything else you wanted to add on them?
Drift Creek Falls.
This is the top of the podium for me. This is the best bridge, St. John's Bridge.
All right.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy to come to that conclusion. Yeah, I can see why people do.
All right,
Yeah,
there's a list of all 29 bridges from the suspension bridge inventory.
Of what?
I know. I'm going to see how many of these still exist.
Well, that's part of the problem too, right?
Yeah. This is the oldest one that still exists by far. Last check 2007.
Okay, good.
Yes,
I'm
it's
glad.
still there.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're actively keeping track of these things.
Rogue River has one.
Where? Where in the Rogue River is
It
there
says
one?
Grave Creek, Oregon. Crossing the
What the
Rogue
hell is that?
Rivers. I don't know where Grave Creek is, but
Well, is that US 101 or is that a different alignment of it? I don't know. See, I have a lot of questions about this.
no, that is
This list that Alps is presenting right now.
the Grave
and
Creek Bridge would be on Old 99 actually. If that is still a suspension span, I'm checking. That is a covered bridge. Never mind. I have no idea.
That might be where I'm remembering it from. I think Doug's actually featured that one.
I have no idea.
Well, if it's a
they
covered
listed it
bridge,
here, but it's not a suspension bridge.
if it's a covered bridge, I'm sure Doug has covered it. Yeah.
I'm looking.
Hey, see what I did there? All right. Well, I have a lot of. I find Steve's list right now very questionable, and I have a lot of questions about it.
I'm just looking at this thing. I don't know.
If you folks have questions about this PowerPoint that we've done, now's a good time to ask us. Because we've come to the end of the journey here, see? You know? Somehow I've made it to the end of this show without killing Steve for his hatred of cable stay bridges.
Apparently, Opal Springs has one across the Crooked River. I don't know.
Alright, well that makes sense.
Let's see what
Crooked
this-
River sounds about right.
I have no... Southwest Jordan Road. I'm going to see if this actually is.
I have no idea where the hell that is. Are you just like pulling places out of your ass right
No,
now?
I'm reading what they listed. That is actually a suspension span on Southwest Jordan Road, which is just west of US 97 by Culver and Madras.
Yeah, your mom is at a suspension span.
No, this is an actual suspension span.
You think so, huh?
It's on the list, and it looks like one. So I'm
Really?
counting it.
It looks like one? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So Culver, Oregon,
Yeah.
there is one.
I don't even know where the hell that is. Like, what part of Oregon is that?
It's north of Redmond,
I don't know where that is.
north of Bend.
I don't know where that is either.
You know where Bend is.
I do not know where Bend is.
Great, near
Maybe
Crater
it's
Lake.
Go over and find out.
Where?
Where's Crater Lake?
Is it near Crater Lake then?
Yeah, Bend is near Crater Lake, so go north from there.
Okay. So, all right. So, like, you're naming places that are in the middle of nowhere then.
Well, it's all stuff I'm about to do 97, so I'm gonna find these things.
Okay. Oh, are we back to this US 97 trip you've been talking about?
I guess. I'm going there the next major U.S. trip I'm taking is going to be U.S. 97, 395 and stuff. So.
Oh my God! You know, perhaps you and the peanut gallery who are watching this episode, you won't be able to blame me when I say, "All right, I'm going to head out," because I have to deal with these clowns every week. So, thank you all for watching season 3. We've made it to the end of the line here.
Has anybody actually asked you any questions? Or
Mercifully, we've reached. I actually have gotten questions here.
Oh my goodness!
So, you know, shut your face, young man. Okay.
If my face continues to shut itself, I'll be very happy.
Okay. That will make 2 of us. I did get some questions about something very special that's on the next slide that I'm going to show you guys. So, I'll talk to you about that in a second. I will also remind you about the Philadelphia National Road Meet, which is being hosted by yours truly in August this year. Tom, you're going to that, right?
I'm trying to convince Jessica, yes.
I mean, what kind of convincing do you need to do at this point?
Now you throw in a baseball game, it's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah, well, you know, so, I mean, there shouldn't be any convincing at this point. Should be like, hey, Jessica, we're going to Philadelphia on August 20th. Don't ask questions, okay?
Problem is, my nephew's birthday is that day, so...
Well, your nephew can move his birthday. So,
no.
I think that you should...
He still can't really move yet, so...
Well, that's not my problem. You should, you should facilitate alternative methods of transit or whatever.
If I can bring him with me, I'd bring him with me.
I would actually think that would be pretty cool.
Well, see
if you can negotiate that.
Yeah. See how he feels on his first birthday.
Yeah. I'm sure he won't object. Yeah, leave you to the diaper changing. That would be awesome.
I'm definitely bringing someone else with me in that case.
But anyway, hope to see you guys at the National Meet on the weekend of August 20th and 21st. It'll be a lot of fun. You can meet me, and you can swear at me, and you can throw shit at me.
You can be Mr. Angry, yes.
That's right. And you can go yell at Tom and Alps and Adam Prince and all the other knuckleheads who show up.
I'll be there on the 21st, definitely.
Well, you're not going to miss the New Jersey part of the weekend, I know. So, I'm saving the Jersey shit for you.
Aww.
So,
all the stuff I've seen.
Yeah, which means you won't show up.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen all the stuff on the other side also. It doesn't matter.
I mentioned the Season 3 extension at the top of this show, and if you were paying attention earlier, I said that I promised at the end of this PowerPoint I would talk a little bit about the show that we are doing as part of the Season 3 extension. And we're going to give this show a shot next Saturday. Please join us, March 19th. I think the start time for this is going to be 6 o'clock, although I still have to work out the exact start time with my co-host. I lied. I think it's actually going to be 7. I don't know.
Well, that'll help those of us at the Natchez Meet watch this at 6 o'clock Central.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if that's an actual consideration.
We might be able to, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
And anyone who lives within 100 miles of Mississippi and Louisiana should consider attending that.
Yeah, so...
Not a lot of people, but...
One of the things that I really want to do with this live format going forward as we transition away from seasons and scheduled programs and whatnot is I want to kind of use this medium to broadcast stuff that gets into more serious topics. And one of these topics that I've kind of been intrigued about is documenting the Selma and Montgomery Civil Rights Marches of March of 1965, for which there is a signed scenic byway that takes you from Selma to Montgomery that you can clinch from beginning to end.
And a very interesting bridge.
There is a bridge along this route that is very famous, absolutely, yep. That will be talked about. I clinched this byway in January of 2022, and from the moment that I clinched it, I immediately began to think about ways that I could talk about this drive and also the historical events surrounding it. And my good friend Laura is going to be my co-host for this show next Saturday, and we're going to bring a very special virtual tour episode to you right around I guess it's going to be right around the anniversary of the march. It's going to be, I think, the actual march that ended up at the Alabama State Capitol started on March 21st. So this is going to be kind of right before the 57th anniversary of that march from Selma to Montgomery. And we'll talk about the march itself. We'll talk about the roads. I'm sure the roads will come up at some point, so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some of the historical figures who helped organize the march and some of the adversaries of that march as well. And we'll do it all in one nice little episode that we hope you'll join us for. And check the YouTube homepage for a exact start time. It probably will be 7 o'clock Eastern. But we'll post that in the coming days. So that's what's coming up immediately on the channel as we transition away from Season 3. So thank you guys for humoring me for this episode, even though I'm still very angry with you about your position on cable stay bridges.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
I told you I like the single cable stay bridges. So.
Yeah, well...
It could be worse. Let's see here.
Oh, there we go.
You had questions.
Color goes a long way, Dan. Bright color goes a long way.
Yeah, well,
You said you had questions and you haven't answered any of them yet. So.
I answered questions when there was something that came up about the show next week.
Okay,
Like
so-
what?
Okay.
What are you talking
I
about?
don't know. You're chatting with people. I guess you're answering them that way.
Am I not allowed to do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's your show.
Oh, it's your show. Yeah. Yes. Let's see. Tom, do you have a hot date night you gotta be to in the next few minutes, or what's your deal right now?
I don't. Just sitting around closing out the night. So I got nowhere to be.
After 3.5 hours, are we actually still going to show videos? All right.
I'm gonna show a couple, cause this, I hate to leave you guys hanging like this, just to be like, oh hey, guess what? This is the end of the PowerPoint, and screw you. I'm going to show you a couple of videos just to humor you guys for a little bit. One of my favorite videos to do was a lap around the Portland Inner Loop.
Yep. I wonder, how much do Portland residents consider the entire thing 405 and 5 together, the inner loop, versus just 405 being the loop and 5 being the main line?
They probably all consider it to be potential future bike lanes.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know 5 is grossly under capacity and there's no interest in widening it, but no, I am curious, does the entire thing qualify? Because, like, you look at Rochester, New York, where they had the inner loop until recently, and then the part of 490 was considered part of the inner loop as well. So, when we're driving the 405... is the rest of 5 also considered inner loop or only 405?
Well, yeah, so, the inner loop thing is something that I just happen to call it myself.
That makes sense.
I don't think that there is an actual formal designation for it. But, I'm very stupid, so I just put, 2 and 2 together, and I'm like, oh, hey, this looks like an inner loop. So
given the interchanges on each end and how there are pretty major ramps feeding in that way.
Oh yeah.
It seems reasonable that you could consider the whole thing to be part of the same loop.
Holy crap! 50 miles an hour. Jeez.
Yeah, but it's speed 50, not speed limit, so you can go as fast as you want.
So Tom,
it said speed limit on there.
Oh, that's the speed limit on it. Oh well.
Yeah, so Tom could take his Challenger and go 120, and he could race my Honda Accord on it if he
not now that truck in the left lane.
Yeah,
the video going south. That's good.
Yeah, no Texas 130 style speed limit 85s on
is
here.
When you get the great views off the left side. As you get past the fence, obviously you're pointing straight ahead, but yeah, there's great views to the left here.
Yeah, this is a great
really
view. Yeah, this is a great view of downtown Portland here as you descend from the bridge. Yeah. This is one of those money shot views of Portland. There are a few around the freeway system, but this is one of my favorite ones.
And
right
this
here.
highway changes so much from end to end. 405 is a fantastic road.
Yeah, it is by far the shortest of the 3 405s, yet it packs the most punch out of the 3, I think.
Oh, yeah.
This is, as I said in the PowerPoint, this is a great urban drive, but...
You're not going to get to drive the other 2 405s without hitting traffic, and ever.
No.
This one you can drive at many hours without hitting traffic.
Washington 405, Interstate 405, that's the worst one. It's boring and there's traffic.
Yeah.
There are parts of it that are decent, but yeah, there's the parts where it drops lanes randomly do not help it.
Yes, that's frustrating. And the toll, what does the toll lanes top out on that on I-405 in Washington? Is it like $11 or something?
Yeah, I don't know, but there's more toll lanes coming, so...
Yeah, great.
Yeah, the one in California, 5 lanes each way, and you have traffic in both directions in the middle of the day.
Yes, and on Saturday, Sunday.
Yep. I was there for a few days in college. We had a Quiz Bowl tournament there, And I just remember like 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. on a random weekday, I crossed it and both directions were stopped. And I'm just like, yeah, that's quality. Okay.
Well, at least with the 405, if you're bumper-to-bumper traffic, at least you have some scenery to look at every once in a while.
Well, California moves. Even when you're stuck in traffic, it moves slowly. It never really stops fully.
It's not like Chicago traffic where it's just like you're in it forever. It will cut along.
I've noticed California traffic, it's everywhere, but it's not as bad as some cities where it stops dead for minutes at a time.
So that's the thing that, like me, I lived in Chicago in high school, and people always tell me in California, oh, we have the worst traffic here. It's like, no, you don't.
No.
You don't.
It's bad,
you have the most freeways. That's why you think that, but you have the most freeways, but you don't have the worst traffic.
Well, they have the most traffic. They don't have the worst traffic.
Right.
That's how I would look at it.
That's an important distinction.
San Francisco has worse traffic than LA.
Yes.
I would agree.
It does.
That. Yeah. Yeah, because it's quantity in the case of LA, but that doesn't necessarily add up to more congestion.
And the thing is, if you're not trying to clinch every route in LA, which obviously I was, but there's enough parallel freeways that you can work your way around most of the congestion most of the time. And plus, nobody uses the surface streets, so those are always ways around the worst of it.
Yeah, I used to take Arrow Highway and Foothill a lot to get around 10 and 210.
Yep. I've noticed some states, like California, no one uses surface streets as alternates. Some states, like New Jersey, the surface streets back up just as badly as the freeway because everyone uses everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're showing the video of pretty much the full thing, so you're considering 5 to be part of the inner loop. And this, where it narrows down to 2 lanes here, is really where it shouldn't.
Yeah, so the East Side Improvement Project is aimed at improving this 2-lane section of the 5 between the 84 merge up ahead at the convention center here and the split for the 405, which we saw at the beginning of the video.
I think somebody in the comments was saying that there's a group called No More Freeways opposing this.
Oh, yeah.
Which has to be like the most brand name Portland anything has ever existed.
Is this freeway group associated with the Road Enthusiasts Facebook group?
If I can imagine. Well, it's a possibility because I've noticed a lot of new urbanists have popped up lately.
Yeah. So that's a tour of the loop around Portland. I will show you guys one more video. How's that for a deal? And because I did not steal a bus or a light rail train, I did not drive across the Tilikum Crossing. Otherwise, I would put that video on a loop endlessly for you people.
You would have your lowest viewership ever.
No, well, maybe so, but they would be worth it because I would be punishing you people endlessly for your disdain for that bridge. So it would be worth it in the end.
I would like one where if you did what I did, which is just cross every downtown bridge one at a time, back and forth.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I worked my way up from... Once I walked Tilikum, I then crossed the next 4 or 5 bridges downtown, each one way. One of them I did both ways. I forgot which, but it was fun to get all this out of the way.
We will end tonight's episode with this drive where we clinched the Northbound I-405 freeway. I have videos of all of the Willamette and Columbia River bridges already available on YouTube. You can go find them there. Also, all of the Portland freeway coverage you could possibly want is already on YouTube as well. So I won't recap everything for you here. I'll just give you a couple of snippets.
It's interesting, though, that we're almost to 405, and still it's trees on both sides, very park-like and rural seeming, despite being right outside downtown.
Well, Portland is a very pretty city.
Well, just 5 itself being until this point right here, it's all scenery, and then suddenly you're in the middle of the city.
Yeah, suddenly, boom.
Just like that. Yeah. It's pretty.
This is not Los Angeles, young man.
And Los Angeles has some great scenery also on the outskirts, but you have to go a lot longer to find it.
Well, and also the 5 is a bazillion lanes at that point. So
Yeah. Oh, if you're doing 5, then you're doing it wrong through LA.
yeah, I would. Yeah, the next time I'm in LA, I look forward to not following the 5 freeway.
5 is the only highway in Los Angeles I haven't clinched.
Really?
Every other one I've done.
No kidding.
Even 10 I've driven through LA, but I've not done all 5.
Wow. I've clinched an
probably...
LA freeway that you haven't.
But I've clinched every other freeway, so I think I win.
I would probably put 5 behind 105 even.
Yeah.
105's got the benefit it's been in movies and it's newer, got more interesting structures.
I had to disobey the restriction on traffic not being allowed to go in the easternmost segment in order to clinch the 105.
Yeah, I think I remember you telling me the story. You did like hop exits or something.
Yeah, and I got to the end and I had to like go around and I just looked around. There were no cops. I'm like, screw this. I'm just U-turning. And I did it.
I did that on the Garden Grove Freeway. I fucked up like that. That's a really complicated interchange. 20, 22, 57, and 5. I fucked up the way I wanted to go on 22, and I just got off the freeway and I just looped right back on because there's no cops there. My wife Jessica's like, "What are you doing? You can't do this." Who's gonna why?
Yeah, Jess wouldn't understand because she's not a real road geek.
She gets a lot of the scenic stuff. I don't think she gets the freeway clinching so much. She gets like when I took her on 23. Like she got that. Like she understood that. Like this was a very beautiful road. She's like, "Oh, I understand why you want to go this way."
Smelled like blue dog inside the van. Yeah, no.
What?
Sublime.
What?
Sublime has.
Oh yeah, now I get it. Okay.
Well, I was just about to say, Tom, if you bring Jess to Philly in August, she'll get it.
Come on out, yeah. There's plenty for non-road geeks to enjoy about Philly.
Yes, there really is, and I got a lot of family in the area. We have all the excuses in the world to head out that way.
Excellent.
So I'm not sure why this isn't a done deal already.
I think a lot of people are gonna come to this, bring family, and the family's just gonna explore the city for the day while they look at the roads.
And you can go, Tom, you and Jess can go on a gay bar hop with whoever.
All right. Trans bar.
That is actually, I did not pull that out of my ass just now. Somebody is actually looking to coordinate that.
Okay. I would not do that because I would get hit on endlessly by people I'm not
Really?
attracted to.
You wouldn't do that?
No, I already know I've had enough gay people hit on me that I'm not going to a gay bar because I will just be hit on endlessly. I don't need that in my life.
We were in when we were in Oahu. It wasn't just me and Jessica. It was her brother who went with us and a couple of her friends. And there's this taco truck stand in Waikiki that's right behind a gay bar.
Okay.
And I'm the only one who's like really picking up on that this is a gay bar. So they're all tagging themselves as like this is where they ate dinner and everything. And Jessica's brother did. So like a half hour goes by and I tell him like, you realize that was a gay bar. You just tagged yourself in. And he was freaking out. Like he tried to fix it. It's like, well, did you not enjoy your meal, man? It was great, actually.
Oh my god.
There used to be a gay bar when I was in college between the college campus and my dorm. I remember walking past it one night in February when it was 10 degrees out. And there were guys standing outside in shorts and fishnets, and I'm just like,
oh my god.
I don't care how fashionable you think this is. This is just not the time. You can wear pants today. It's okay. There's ever a day, it's when it's 10 degrees out in the middle of February. No, still. I was impressed by it, but pretty horrified that anyone would consider wearing that little clothing at that time of year.
Oh my god.
It's like swimming in.
I think we've convinced Tom officially to make this trip to Philly in August.
All right.
Okay. Tom, we'll put you on the short list for the After Hours tour.
Nice.
Yeah, I really got to get out there because New River Gorge. I mean, I would drive out to West Virginia from there. I haven't done that since it became a national park. I think it was a national recreation area the last time I was out there.
Yeah.
I need a new map for that. I got a whole bunch of maps for these parks.
I think that the national park designation for New River Gorge even is.
It's really new.
Yeah, it wasn't a national park when I was there, and that was in 2020.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like I think it was
just
within
became a
few
national
months.
park.
It was within a few months of my visit there. Yeah.
I just went there to drive the old bridge, which is a fantastic drive. You have to go north to south for it, but I don't even know if it was a national park when I did that. I was just doing it to do it. But it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's one of those I had to. I this is my third time there. I had to try something different.
Oh yeah, like if you're in the area, also just check out the bridge walk on the New River Gorge Bridge.
Yeah, or you can do the jump off the side. They have.
Well, you can only do that
activity.
on you can only do that on Bridge Day, which
Right.
is in October, I think, every year. But that's
I've been there on Bridge Day.
Oh, you have been there, right? Yeah.
I went there once as a road, once on Bridge Day, and then the third time when I just went was to clinch the rest of 19. And since I only needed 19 south of there, I was able to use the old road and just get onto 19 south of there.
Well, guys, that's all I've got for you tonight for Portland.
It's pretty good.
Guys, do you have
Nice
any?
season 3.
Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations. We made it to the end without killing anybody, although I came close on a couple of occasions. Do you guys have any closing thoughts before we sign off?
My Portland stuff right now on my website is all quite old.
Boo.
I have no idea when I'm getting to the new stuff, but it's not going to be for a number of years. So stick with the videos that you got on YouTube. Everybody wants to see more of the highways. Go to Roadway Whiz.
Go to Roadway Whiz, go to gribblnation.org to see more, not just from Oregon, but also from our Hawaii series that we're working on. And we'll also have a very special edition Hawaii webinar for you coming in April. So I'm looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hosting it with this ding-dong Tom, who, while he doesn't like cable stayed bridges either, I'm willing to overlook that because he just doesn't know any better. So I'm looking forward to hosting that with Tom. And Tom, if you have any closing thoughts on Portland as a whole, now's a good time to let them be known.
Well, I think you guys hit on all the major stuff. We do have our own Portland page on Gribble Nation that we did in 2019. If you're looking for more Oregon stuff, Doug has done a ton of it. I've done quite a bit of it too. Great state to explore and check out. A lot of stuff's a little bit off the mainstream in the road community. So I'd say it's probably worth your attention.
Yeah, Doug, I know he couldn't be here tonight to join us in person, but Doug has done a lot of work in Oregon over the years, and he's contributed a ton of useful stuff to gribblnation.org in the way of Oregon stuff.
Yep.
And I know that he's probably working on more stuff for that state as we speak. So definitely check out his contributions.
But still, boo.
Yeah, I wish he could have been here to fact check some of the stuff that I threw out there recklessly, but anyway, thank you very much to everybody. This is a great show to do. Thank you all for a great season 3. This was great to have you guys, Steve, Tom, all the cast of thousands who joined us since December for this. This was a lot of fun.
Scott doesn't like it.
Who doesn't like it?
Scott.
He doesn't like what?
He's angry.
Why is it? Well, I don't know. What's he angry about?
No.
Why don't you?
He's
text
angry
him?
about Hawaii.
He's just angry in general.
Well,
angry.
Scott needs to calm down a little bit. He needs to settle down just a little bit because he's going to Hawaii himself in a little while, and I'm sure he's going to come back with even better pictures than we have on our blog site. So, this is an opportunity, Scott, to up your game and up the road enthusiast game.
Scott, up yours.
Yeah, up yours. Okay.
If you can get Coley Pass, Scott.
If you're
me the
taking
photos.
orders, Scott, we'll give you a list. How's that?
Coley Pass. So, you got to go on a military base somehow, but you can do it.
Yeah, it's true. I'm missing the northernmost tiny piece of H3. So yeah. And the southernmost tiny mile of it.
I want to see Scott try to hike the Stairway to Heaven on Oahu.
I wanted to do that when we were there, but
I'm
I'm the only one who's in shape to do it.
Yeah, you're the only one who could probably pull it off. I wish I could do that, but I know I wouldn't have the balls to try to get past the security guards.
Yeah, I ran Diamond Head. I was up there about like 30 minutes before anybody else, but that was about as close as I got to stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I did Diamond Head too, but I walked it because I'm lame. But, you know.
Alright.
So we're going to sign off here. This was your look into Portland, Oregon and vicinity. Thank you all very much. Thank you to Steve. Thank you to Tom from California for joining us tonight. Really enjoyed this episode. Really enjoyed the season 3 of programs that we put on for you guys. This was a lot of fun. Glad to do this. Hope you can join us as we transition into the post-season realm of live programming, whatever that'll ultimately look like. Playoffs. And it starts next Saturday, so please join us for that next week. There will be a link on the YouTube homepage for that in a little bit, probably in the next day or so. Hope you can join us for that and our future live endeavors on this channel. And from all of us here at RoadwayWiz and GribbleNation.org and AlpsRoads.net, this is Dan, Tom, and Steve saying thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
And Tilikum sucks.